Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
I can't do this. There are memories that I just can't bear. What?
Stereo speakers on. Oh, I can't tell if. Hang on. Up there.
Greetings, everyone.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay.
I'm Jonathan,
I'm Nick,
and we are the Goslings.
and we're glad you're joining us tonight. Thanks for waiting. We know we're a couple minutes late, but we're glad you're here.
Hey,
Hope
Diane.
your
Good to see you.
last Sunday before Christmas is going well. You're probably watching football.
The calm before the storm.
We are not watching football. This is for people who are more aware of what's going on in the world.
we're not sports ball aficionados.
We're not sports ball aficionados by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
We're
Yeah.
glad you're here with us, watching us instead of the Dallas
Yeah,
Cowgirls or whatever the team's called. I don't know.
a whole other sport. Yeah.
But let's get started. Without further ado, if you would,
Yeah.
raise your drinking vessels and toast with us. Take up the broken sword of your father.
And strike down the darkness.
Cheers.
Cheers. Say, Nick, these are some fancy mugs we're drinking out of.
They are.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, they're called the Kothon Spartan Mug.
Yeah.
This is from our in-kind sponsor, Joel Cherico at ChericoPottery.com. These are the mugs that the Spartans drink out of,
Nice.
as best we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the closest thing to what is described in history. Joel handcrafts each and every one of these by hand,
Mm-hmm.
and he designed this mug in collaboration with Stephen Pressfield, who's quite the subject matter expert
Yeah, he is.
when it comes to the
Absolutely.
Spartans.
Yes.
So,
Yes, author of The Gates of Fire, my
Indeed.
favorite novel. And
so
yep,
good. Gates of
I already
Fire.
know.
each one of these is handmade and hand painted. Joel makes a ton of handcrafted pottery at ChericoPottery.com. Everybody should check him out.
100%.
Fantastic.
100% check it out. Check it
Yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you mention our other sponsor?
Yes, if you haven't noticed, in keeping with the theme of our Kothon Spartan mugs, you may have noticed the luxurious Leonidian beard that I have been sporting here for the past few months. And that is thanks to Mike Fisher, who is the owner and proprietor of Giordani Jovanovic hair care products. Hair care products and skincare products made by real men for real men. Or as I like to say, be as sexy as you are deadly. Give 007 a run for his money. Be the John Wick of your local HOA with JordaniJovanovic.com.
That's right.
Excellent business. Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. We really appreciate the support, Mike. Thank
Yes.
you so much. And just wanted to say greetings and Merry Christmas as well to the Trump card who's watching.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Trump
We're
card.
glad you guys are joining us. It looks like we got several people watching right now. Fantastic. We had an amazing we had an
This is a
amazing
big week
interview.
for us.
It has been a huge week for us.
Yeah.
We had the privilege of interviewing none other than John Howler
Yeah.
from Prophecy Update out of Fellowship Bible Church or Fellowship Bible Chapel. And that interview is something we're going to play for you here in just a second. When we were doing the interview with him, he was actually in Jerusalem right now. He's in Jerusalem for a conference. Can't remember the name of the conference off the top of my head. But he is boots on the ground there, first person, kind of giving us the lowdown on the spirit of the times in Jerusalem. And how that ties into his prophecy updates.
Yeah.
Yep.
We had an amazing time with John. It was a short interview because we were pressed for time. But honestly, John is kind of like well, kind of like next week's guest,
Mm-hmm.
in that we could probably talk to John for
Hours and hours.
3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could have so much to talk about with John. He's incredibly gracious with his time. He's incredibly informative. He loves going down rabbit trails and doing deep dives. He's not shy about, he doesn't get gun shy about discussing any topic. We had an absolute blast with him. So we're gonna air roughly 2/3 of the interview with John that we recorded last week, and we'll be in the chat to interact and answer any questions that anybody might have. But if you want to see the entire interview, Nick, what is the best way to watch the entire unedited interviews with all of the guests on the Goslings?
Including all the stuff we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube. You can go to patreon.com/the Goslings, sign up there, become a member, and you can watch every bit of the interview with our guests moving forward. That's where you can find everything.
Yeah.
We still reserve quite a bit of great information for free here on the channel. As you're gonna see tonight, but you can get the full experience if you give them a patron. Patreon.com/the Goslings.
Yeah. And also, this was another big week for us because we hit 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, did we hit 1,000 subscribers? Yes, we did. We hit 1,000 subscribers this week. We've been working really hard at that. Thank you guys. That's all because of you guys doing the thing, doing the needful, and clicking the subscribe button, which we can't thank you enough for. Thank you guys so much. We finally hit our goal. We were really wanting to do that before the end of the year, and so encouraging. And glad you guys love the interviews and our guests enough to hit the button. So thank you for doing that.
And if you haven't yet, you absolutely should subscribe.
He's guiding me through all the captions and steps. Thank you. I need it.
Nick clicks the button. I just talk.
I don't have a checklist. I used to have a checklist because this is great. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So good.
If you're watching us because maybe you heard about us because of John Holler, or maybe you found us through a Gary Wayne interview or something else, maybe a Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, I found them through a Gary Wayne interview. Exactly.
Interview. You should absolutely subscribe. Take up, as Nick says, take up the broken sword of your finger.
That's right.
And strike the bell, and become a subscriber to the Goslings. And then you can see if you would like to also become a Patreon member as well. But we are booked out through January and into the beginning of February with guests, and we have several more in the works. So every Sunday through January and into February, we will have guests at the same time, 5:30 or 4:30 p.m. Central Time, maybe 5
Yeah, we might push it to 5.
Yeah, something like that.
We'll see.
We record our interviews beforehand, which is actually why our interview with John Holler was as short as it was.
Yep.
We kind of had to break so that we could get to the airing of the previous week's live streams. It's a nice new format that I think will serve our guests really well.
I think it'll serve our guests really well.
I think you as the audience will appreciate it.
Because we're not pressured. We don't feel like we're under the gun to keep everything constricted to time. So we're not rushing to get the questions. And we can let our guests be thorough with everything.
Yeah.
I want to give a quick shout out to the people in the chat. Mike Fisher, what's up, man? Cheryl, thank you for watching. Pete from Creepy Little Bugs. What up, dude? Good to see you.
Dude, thank you, Pete.
Yeah, thanks for the comment, man.
I miss you, buddy.
Suzuki GS, thank you so much. We really appreciate, and I don't think I missed, the Trump card, if I didn't mention that. Merry Christmas.
Card.
Thanks for joining. And so glad you guys are here watching. We're going to jump into
What's up, Cheryl?
John Holler's interview. You want to do it right now?
Without further ado, we'll be in the chat, so feel free to keep the chat rolling. Of course, that helps with the algorithm and all that, but we just like interacting with you guys anyways, and we're going to roll that beautiful bean footage of John Holler. We're going to roll the game tape and let that interview go. And so enjoy John Holler, Prophecy Watchers.
And we're going to cut in about halfway through. We're going to cut in about halfway through this interview just to jump in and chat with you guys and, address any big questions or anything you guys might have. But we'll jump in about halfway through and then we'll finish everything off back after that.
And we'll tell you where you can also get some cool t-shirts in case you maybe want to do some little alien hunting or you want to get a typewriter or anything, whatever. So Anyways, whatever. All right, guys. Here's John Holland.
Here's John Holland.
Never heard of John Holland.
Your YouTube feed is crap. Stop wasting your time watching bot-boosted shills and self-appointed gurus cloying for your attention. Instead, join the Goslings interview live streaming podcast. The Goslings, a dark-lit digital speakeasy of free thinkers. A super chat of radical truth-seeking wizards who eat trolls for second breakfast. Topics that'll make your mama's hair stand on end. Ideas that'll make your pastor's knees knock. Guests that will illuminate the hidden chambers of your mind. And interviews that strike down the darkness. Welcome to the Goslings.
Three, two, one. Go anywhere. Be adventurous.
So tonight was just sort of an introduction. They had a Jewish rabbi and a Christian guy talking, and I can talk about that because I think
Oh, we know this guy. He goes on the Doug Hamp show. Remember Doug Hamp? He goes on that.
I think we're sort of on the cusp of where we need to do these things a little bit differently. The relationship between Christians and Jews. I had a talk with a couple guys who do documentary films from the UK. They're doing a series called Whose Land. It kind of got off track because of the pandemic and everything being shut down for the last couple of years. But I had a long talk, pretty deep talk with these guys about my thoughts, and my thoughts kind of came out of my sermon from last Sunday, which was the trial of Jesus. And so we had this, how is this going to work? This,
Geez, I bet that's a good sermon. The trial of Jesus.
reconciliation between Christians and Jews in the end times. I don't think it's just getting together for a conference with, like we did tonight with an ABBA cover band, even though they were very, very good and with songs I actually knew, as opposed to a lot of popular radio now that I have no idea who these people are and what they're singing.
Same.
I mean, and I'm 68, so I have a reason for that. But
I'm 39. I don't, John.
Okay, yeah,
I'm with you.
you probably need to get some counseling or something.
You know what? Tried it twice, and she said no.
Yeah. Why are you here?
Thanks, Margaret. Love you.
So anyway,
Hey, Phil.
but you know,
Love
we
you,
have
mate.
these conferences and we get together and we talk and we say nice things about that. But there's sort of an apex. There's a reconciliation thing that's coming. And I've kind of been thinking, and I know there's other guys that have been thinking about it, is like, what does that look like? How does that work out? What are we doing? And I heard a talk, a little introduction to a talk by a guy I know named Reg Kelly. And so I'll be upfront, you know, with everybody that I would hope it's a preacher of rapture, but I'm not convinced of that. I think it's later. Okay. And a lot of the guys I talked to tonight are on that same level. And you'll probably
questions actually.
Yeah. You'll probably find less preacher people in Jerusalem than you will in America. Certainly in America, there's no doubt about it, unless there's a big group of them visiting from out of town. And because I've sat and had long talks with people here in Jerusalem, and they're just not pre-trib. And so I was thinking about this because my sermon was on the trial of Jesus last week, and you can go listen to it if you want on our YouTube channel, Fellowship Bible Chapel. And Jesus went to the Sanhedrin, and he had these 3 trials on, you know, and they violated like 20 rules. Like they weren't supposed to try somebody in the morning before the morning sacrifice. Well, this, you know, the hearing he had before Annas, and then the one before Caiaphas, the high priest, and Annas, the former high priest, who still wielded a lot of power at that time. those were in the morning. They violated the thing. And then, he goes to the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, they had to have at least 23 there. They could have as many as 71. And we know from scripture there are some people who are part of that council. I think Joseph of Arimathea was part of that. No, I don't know if Joseph of Arimathea was. The guy who came, Nicodemus, who came to Jesus by night, I'm pretty sure he was part of the Sanhedrin. And they had to have a majority vote. But so if you had 23, which was the minimum that you needed for a trial at the Sanhedrin, you had to, whatever was done with the person who was charged, they had to be convicted by at least 2 votes, which means it couldn't have been 12 to 11. It would have had to have been 13 to 10. And if all of them were there were 70 plus the high priest, so there's 71. The other rule was that if Jesus was convicted by unanimous acclamation of the Sanhedrin, which is totally against the rules. They have to vote because it's a capital crime. So they violated all these rules, and then it was a unanimous vote. And under the rules, a unanimous vote had to be thrown out. Now you think, well, wait a minute, isn't that what you're going for? And the reason is, and I think this sort of has to do with Jewish culture. There's the joke. I heard it tonight at the Christian Media Summit. If you have 2 Jews, you have at least 3 opinions on something.
I was going to say God hates groupthink, maybe.
Well, did you ever read that book World War Z by Max Brooks, Mel Brooks' son? So he talks about that in there. He says, it's a fictional, thing about the zombie apocalypse, but they had this concept in there called the 10th man concept, where it's like, in a room of 10 men, we want one guy. And it was in the book, it's developed in Israel. And he said, if everybody has a plan, we got to have at least one guy who disagrees with the plan.
One voice of dissent.
Well, and that was the whole point of the rule, was that if there was complete agreement among all these Jewish leaders, scholars, whatever, then there must be collusion and something corrupt going on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting, as someone who's been a trial lawyer for 40-some years, it's kind of an interesting concept because, in federal court, I don't know if it's still the rule or not, you have to get a unanimous verdict. So you can have the lone, person holding out.
Yeah.
But the Sanhedrin rules were no unanimous. If it's a unanimous verdict, it's by definition corrupt and has to be thrown out. So as I was preparing that talk, I went through and looked at when the other through the book of Acts, which our church is going to be teaching on next. All the apostles, John, Peter, they got drugged before, and then Paul, all got drugged before the Sanhedrin. And I heard a talk by a guy I know named Reg Kelly, and I'm pretty sure Reg is post-trib, but he just really thinks through the scriptures. And I don't agree with him on everything, okay? But I learn a lot when I listen to him. They have a little group called the Mystery of Israel, and they just get together like 50, 60 people, and they talk about the scripture and ask questions, and somebody will do a 2-hour presentation and the other people will challenge them and that type of thing. It's just a great format that I've been to a few times. But Reg was talking about what do we, and this is what I talked about with some guys from the UK tonight who've been thinking about this too, is like this reconciliation thing that's going to happen. How does it happen? So let me just give you kind of the pre-wrath, post-trib perspective on how that all works out. With the understanding that, like, we all want pre-trib, okay?
Yeah.
But what if it's not? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the best evidence of who's right on that will be when it happens,
For sure.
So if it happens pre-trib, argument's over. But if it doesn't, then we've got a whole host of issues to deal with in the body of Christ. And the apostasy thing is a concerning thing to me because it means falling away, departing from the faith, and that's a concern of mine. But I think too, just as a sidebar is what lawyers say when they want to go off topic, and it just sounds like they're, they're trying to sound smart and making a point. But for example, I had a big trial once, and the judge said counsel could have a sidebar. The jury's in the courtroom, and we're examining witnesses and presenting evidence, and we go up there, and you think, is there something wrong? And he's like, I ate something last night that's not really agreeing with me, and I really got to go to the bathroom. Do you mind if we take a break now? And so that's what happens at the sidebar sometimes.
Okay.
So, but the sidebar here too is that a lot of times that in this debate over the timing of the rapture, where there's a lot of, you can say it's one of those things where there's a lot of heat but not a lot of light sometimes. The pre-wrath post-trib people will say, well, pre-trib people will be so disappointed they'll fall away from the faith if it's not a pre-trib rapture. And I acknowledge that could happen, but as I've been thinking through it and looking at what goes on, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of problems with everybody in the body because of how severe these things are going to be if we're still here. And so then the question becomes too is how does that relate to this whole Jewish Christian reconciliation thing? And Paul has this phrase in Romans chapter 11, like, I would that I would provoke them to jealousy. And so the question is, how does that come about? What does provoking them to jealousy mean? And I'm more convinced than Reg Kelly and his talk. And it was just kind of a throwaway, but it really stuck with me, which is the way Bible teaching does a lot of times. It's like, I'll do something, I'll work on it, and I'll think, these are the important points. And then somebody will write and like, you taught this and it prompted me to think about this, and I rededicated my life to the Lord. And it's like, okay, well then that's the Lord doing that. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's just pre-trib people are going to be distressed and in trouble, because I think it's going to be people in the post-trib and pre-wrath camps as well, because of the things that are coming. So I just don't like those throwaway I think they're kind of, they're just kind of little bombshell arguments or grenade arguments you throw into the conversation, like, okay, now I've solved that problem. And I'm not sure you have. So the point of all this was, when you look at like Stephen standing before the Sanhedrin, Acts chapter 6 and 7. I mean, he gives this great, to the same guys who tried Jesus, he gives this great defense of this whole Jewish Christian thing that's come together in Jesus, one in Messiah. And it says in there, like his face shone like an angel. Well, who was there when that happened? It was Paul. Paul was standing right there. And who's was the greatest evangelist in the early church?
Oh yeah.
It was Paul. And he wrote, most of the epistles in the New Testament. So it's very, I've just been thinking about it, and I think the phrase that I've seen used is, we need to be a people prepared to stand faithful with the biblical prophetic witness under the guidance of the Holy Spirit in that period of time. And it's going to bring, God will use it to bring both Jews and Gentiles to himself, and then there'll be this unity that'll take place. So I've just been thinking about that. It's just something that's been on my heart now for about 3 weeks. I can't get it out of my head. Mm-hmm. And so then the question is, so how do we move that direction? And I talked to several people. They live here in Jerusalem. They meet regularly with Jews and Jewish leaders, and they know the political people and the parties and all the stuff that's going on right now with Netanyahu trying to form a new government. But then the question is, so we know that there's this time of trouble coming. And how do we, assuming we're here, so let's prepare like we're going to be here. How do we stand as a faithful witness to people at their worst time of history? And we can almost say like, hey, you know what? Listen, we knew this time was coming and we're here to help you as we reconcile. And I think this is how it's going to work out. I'm more convinced of that. So it's just, you know, you gotta think I'm a crackpot or anything, but it's just something that I've been
Yeah, I think it's great.
talking with people about. And then tonight I really had an opportunity with a couple guys to, I won't embarrass them by giving their names. And the one guy was saying, you know, this is what I've been thinking about for years now. How we have all these meetings and we have all this stuff, but where does it end? And it's interesting now. There's a possibility I may go down to Hebron, Friday for Shabbat dinner with a Jewish rabbi and his family.
Oh man, that'd be cool.
And the person's been a Facebook friend of mine and Twitter follower and stuff for a long time. And he's Jewish, man. I mean, he's settler, Zionist, that type of thing. Right. He's a great guy. But, you know, there is this tradition about Hebron that it was at Hebron where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah are buried. And there's no doubt that this is the place. And you have the structure built by King Herod over 2,000 years ago. This stood through earthquakes and everything. And they built a mosque and a synagogue up on the top. But the memorial building that Herod built is pretty much what it was 2,000 years ago. It's one of the oldest, I think, completely intact buildings that they've ever had. And this Hebron today is a flashpoint. It's one of the biggest flashpoints in the conflict between the Jews and the Arabs. But some of the rabbi tradition is that Hebron is the pattern for what will happen, because when Isaac was buried at Machpelah, Jacob and Esau is Edom, you know, and related to the Ishmaelites and that type of thing. And Esau married into that family, which have been at odds for a long time. But the rabbis teach that it will be at Hebron and some great future day where this reconciliation will take place.
Mm.
And so the one thing that we, you know, oh yeah, you know, and I have no doubt Jesus was at the cave of Machpelah, the structure there that Herod had built. And it's been a flashpoint. There was a Jewish guy, what was his name? Goldstein or something like that, who went in there probably 25 years ago or more and shot up the mosque part and killed about 25 people.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. And as a result of that, they've shut down. So there's all these streets there between the Tomb of the Patriarchs building and where the ancient tell was. And the ancient tell is where David had his palace. And you can go there and there's a staircase that you can walk down to get out onto the tell. But in Abraham's time, that staircase was where you would walk up to the city gate of Hebron. And it's one of the oldest staircases, if not the oldest staircases of antiquity that's been uncovered by archaeologists in the world. And I've walked on it. But the other thing too is that when Abraham walked on it, when he came there, it was already 700 or 800 years old.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So you know, we had these things like, you know, you drive around and I have a big case up in Boston. So I spent a lot of time in Boston. You go out to like Cape Ann and that type of thing. You'll see these homes out there built in 1687 or something like that. Well, so in 1687, that means that the staircase to the ancient city of Hebron, where David ruled from for 7 years, so it's 200 years, what is it, 300 years old to us, but it's that it's 4,200 years old.
Yeah.
The staircase.
Yeah.
Been around.
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting thing. So Hebron's very important, and there was I think in 1920 to 29 the Arabs slaughtered. I mean, literally slaughtered 75 Jewish men, women, and children at Hebron, and so it's always been a flashpoint. When I got back from Israel 5 years ago, when we went down there for the first time, I did a talk about, I don't know if it's still on the internet or not. I know I did a talk. I know I prepared a talk called Why Hebron Matters. And I must have become a class project at Al-Quds University because I had all of a sudden I had hundreds of Arab followers. But some of these guys were I looked at their Facebook and other pages, and I mean, these are like Hamas terrorists and stuff that are following me after just talking about it. So it's a very divided city. So hopefully I'm going to get down there. I may, as I said, be able to have a Shabbat dinner before I fly back with a Jewish rabbi and his family. And I think it's these things that I just think it's significant that this is happening at Hebron, where this reconciliation thing happened, and Jewish rabbis believe it's a reconciliation thing that's a pattern for the future ultimate reconciliation between Jews and Arabs and Christians and Jews and all this other stuff. So anyway.
That kind of leads me to one of my questions here. You talk about a flashpoint and a future reconciliation. But then you have in Jerusalem, you have the Dome of the Rock sitting on the ancient temple grounds. Sure. And we understand from Scripture that the temple has to be rebuilt. It's one of the huge markers of end times events that you point out. Does the Dome of the? I mean, it would be a huge flashpoint if the Dome of the Rock had to be removed in order for that to happen. Are they looking at a different location or?
Well, okay, so I'm not sure how to approach this first. So let's talk about the different theories on the locations of the temple. There are about 4. One is the Dome of the Rock. And I also think that maybe we need to look at the scripture because it says when you see Jesus talks about, and that's what Jesus talks about. This is like kind of central to all of end time Bible prophecy.
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 24.
Yeah.
When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, get out of town. But then Paul builds on that in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 2 verse 4. And the question is, does it?
Diane, that Indonesian earthquake, I think it was a 7.5. It was felt in Darwin, the Northern Territory, top end of Australia. We felt it here.
Temple have to be built? And the answer is, I don't know. But I can tell you from talking to some people tonight that this is going to be a big deal in the near term.
What up, guys? So you can see we're starting to go down some pretty deep trails with John Holler in this interview. It was cool while he was talking to him while he was actually there in Israel.
Yeah.
Going to Hebron, going to all these places.
And John was a real trooper too, because he, I think, he had gotten no sleep. He had flown all the way out there.
It's like 3 a.m. when we were having this interview on his time.
Yeah, John was very gracious with his time to basically sit up, well into the small hours, jet lagged, and talk to us. And he could have gone for longer. You know, I mean, like his channel. Let's see, is it what is
It's
it?
Fellowship Bible Chapel.
Fellowship Bible Chapel. He does almost, it's more than weekly updates.
It's like bi-weekly,
right?
Or not bi-weekly. Two times a week.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's like 2 or 3 times a week
Yeah.
he'll do updates, and usually just like audio podcast only kind of format.
If you search John Holler
Yeah,
prophecy update, it'll take you right to it.
yeah, and very relevant information. We were talking about a lot of, you know, stuff that is, you know, historically biblical, but his stuff is, which we'll sort of touch on in the second half, much more relevant to today and very topical.
Yep.
So,
Yep. And we're gonna jump back into that here in just a second. But I think first you wanted to mention the
yes,
the teas.
yes. If you
The tease.
we tease with the teas. You know, if you happen to like any of the T-shirts that you see Nick and I wearing for every interview and every Goslings live stream, you can get those at our Teespring page, Goslings. So I want to say it's like Goslings dot whatever creator / or dash spring. It's basically Teespring's old, you know, or Teespring's new URL.
They did a rebranding and made this hard for us.
Dude, it made it so impossible. Yeah, but if you like our T-shirts and you want to be a little frugal with your money, everybody can win by becoming a Patreon member.
That's right.
If you join the Goslings Patreon, you get discounts on all of our merch. You get a ton of other stuff too. Like we have all these different tiers where you can get like stickers and mugs, and you can get like
a T-shirt.
T-shirts. You can get typewriter one-offs. You can, you know, get custom mentions of
Plus early access, exclusive interviews.
Well, you do behind the scenes stuff like pretty much every week.
Yep.
So it's a lot of fun creating that content, and we put it behind a modest paywall. All of the Patreon tiers are in fiat currency denominations. So, you know,
we do not accept crypto.
No, we do not accept mark of the beast currency.
We don't accept beast money.
Yeah, we accept beast money, not like Leviathan water money.
Right. So I guess it's all beast money.
Yeah, it's all beast money. What does it matter? We take that president. No, but all the way up to, you know, you can pay to, you know, have a question that we will ask the guest, on your behalf, paid sponsorship, you know, if you want to advertise on our page, much like what we do for Mike Fisher with JohnDonovanOvic.com, and like what we do with Joel at Jericho Pottery, we will do that for you. And there's a lot of stuff there, and that's really to help offset the cost of doing this live stream and maintaining the quality, improving the quality, and then also aiming towards getting a producer so that we can gain any technical issues, because just about every time we have something technical come up. That's why we were late today, because the internet was not cooperating, even though Nick spent the morning drilling a hole in the ceiling and running an Ethernet cable to the computer so that we could have direct access.
True.
We've had audio issues in the past. It just, you know, we're growing, and there are growing pains that are associated with that. So we would like to be able to afford a producer someday so that we could have somebody who has that technical proficiency.
Yep,
you know?
absolutely.
And it makes for a better experience for our guests as well.
I think so.
You know, and therefore better interviews. So
that's right.
Sort of
we can strike down more darkness.
Strike it all down.
Strike it all.
Strike down.
Strike it down hard.
Strike it all down.
Real quick shout out to Lynn Etheridge. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Will, appreciate joining Carol Ryan, and of course Ice Queen Empress. Glad that you're joining as well. Thank you guys for watching. Missed you guys when we started the live stream earlier, so just wanted to say thank you for jumping. I know there are more people than that watching, but they jumped in the chat. So just want to say thank you for that. Yeah, and then Mike, you were asking, do we have a T-shirt with wings and the broken sword? We do. I think our very first design of the Goslings T-shirt was a V-neck pattern. We haven't published it, but we did make a design with it. Yeah, we did, and we might need to tweak it a little bit. But our very first T-shirt design was a V-neck tri-blend, which is the same material as this. And it had our Goslings logo on it.
And the logo is good. We just have to tweak the colors a little bit more and maybe redo the resolution of the size, just to make it a little bit better. But I really liked it.
I like the broken sword.
Yeah,
I like the
it's-
broken sword.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll stop patting ourselves on the back now.
I might
We
need
will-
rotator cuff surgery.
And then we'll get back to the rest of this interview with John Holler.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. We're going to be talking a little bit about Israeli politics,
Yep.
some weird stuff going on in the UK, and
Mhm.
also the seat of Satan.
Yes.
So that's all coming up right now, guys. Hope you're liking it. And we'll still be in the chat,
Yeah.
talking with you guys as we watch. Here we go.
Those were some of the questions we were going to ask you. But you know what? When it comes to King Charles, it's so weird calling him King Charles.
Yeah.
Now. Like he's always, even at 39, he's always John at Prince Charles. You know, in my mind. But but you know what? No one ever suspects the. You know who no one ever suspects to try and assassinate the king? The jester.
Yeah.
You know, the fool. No one ever suspects the fool.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a way, it's kind of a 5D chess big brain move by Satan to maybe even
Good point.
utilize
That's a good point.
somebody like him.
So I'm just saying is like I'm not too dismissive. So another one would be, look, I have friends who believe that the final Babylon will be a rebuilt Babylon in Iraq.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it may very well be. Okay.
I remember
now-
all this stuff about Saddam Hussein back in the 90s,
Yeah.
digging that stuff up. I used to read all those like Tex Mars books, about that stuff. Yeah.
And there was a blog post by somebody at the Washington Post. You could probably dig through the web archive and find it. I have at times been able to find it, where they were talking about, hey, let's move the UN to Babylon, rebuild Babylon and move the UN there. And that came from secular people. Sometimes I wonder if they're just trolling us or whether they really.
Yeah.
A little bit like the Pergamum thing that Obama was doing, the seed of Pergamum, I think there's a little bit of that goes around.
Listen,
But it's ritualistic in
that-
nature also.
well, that altar, the Zeus altar from Pergamum, there's a guy who I did a talk on that back in 2016, in March of 2016. It's probably still online someplace. Might be at Believers in Grace Church out in Iowa. And I did a thing on Pergamum that weekend. And I had found this incredible video where the guy did a 3D recreation video of the Acropolis of Pergamum, including the Zeus altar, which ended up in the Pergamum Museum on Museum Island in Berlin. But that altar was the inspiration for a young architect in 1930s Germany named Albert Speer, who used it as the model to build the Nazi reviewing grounds at Nuremberg. And so, I mean, there really is a satanic connection to that type of thing. And then you have our president come along and do the same thing when he accepted the nomination. I think it was at Denver, at Mile High Stadium. So you see all these, again, this is just like these convergence of these things. So my friends who believe that Babylon will be rebuilt in Iraq, I'm not gonna get up and say you're a fruitcake, you're a lunatic for believing that. It may work out that way.
Yeah.
But I also can use common sense that, look at Dubai. It's taken 30 years to get Dubai into this phenomenal commercial city. You have Mohammed bin Salman, who's trying to build that NEOM, the line down there in Saudi Arabia. And they're actually moving. I mean, in my next update, I'll actually have satellite images of what's going on there. And there's been drone footage of the construction going on, and they're building it. But that type of city has, and the look of NEOM inside between those walls is hanging gardens, which is very much like Babylon.
Yep.
And the other thing too to remember too is that when God intervened at Babel, the Tower of Babel, the tower wasn't finished.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that the city has to be completely finished. That's not what I'm saying.
Might be
but
much
it
longer,
has to be
Phil.
this great commercial city.
Gonna be crazy.
And so if that's the case, then you can probably move some of the stuff about end times off a few decades, I think.
Yeah.
which is not a attractive prospect with the way things are going right now.
Right. That's a long few decades, John.
Like I said, I'm 68. Okay, I've been most of the places I wanted to go. Done most of. I haven't shot my age yet in golf, but
Okay.
I've
So
come
there's
within
something
a
to aim
shot.
for.
I've come within one stroke.
Oh, we got to get you and Stephen Pressfield together then. You know.
Oh, yeah.
You
Who's
guys.
that?
He's the guy who wrote the Legend of Bagger Vance and the War of Art, Gates of Fire.
So you guys don't know me that well, so I do have a golf story, and so I have I worked this into. They always say have an elevator speech when you're marketing, and we were trying a case in Fort Worth, Texas, and we're on about the 8th floor and the 9th floor, and on 8, the doors open and a judge gets on. And Fort Worth, Texas is judges wear Stetsons and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I love that.
Yeah.
he
Same.
goes, well, I hear you boys are down here from Ohio trying a case. I said, yes, Your Honor, we are. And you're up there with Judge Crowley. I said, yes, sir. And he goes, well, it's pretty mighty hot. It was in the summer. He goes, mighty hot here, isn't it? He goes, it's so hot. I don't even think I want to go home and cut my grass. And so I said, well, you know, Judge, golf is played on grass. And let me tell you about what happened to me one time when I was playing golf. And so between the 8th floor and the 1st floor, I got my whole story in. And my partner had heard this like 1,000 times by now. He's like, Howard, just shut up. Quit trying to bring that into every conversation. So I went out to play golf with a friend of mine. We're taking the weekend off. He was in from Arizona for the Memorial Tournament, which was at Muirfield Village in Dublin. It was the closest course to the house I lived in. And we would play golf in the morning, tournament in the afternoon. So Sunday morning, we went to a course right across the river. Second hole was 175 yards uphill into the wind. I hit a 6-iron, hit about 10 feet from the hole, boom, in for a hole in one. Then there was a short par 4. Then the 4th hole was 195 yards, downwind. Pins all the way. You can't even see the bottom half of the pin because it's behind a trap. And I turned to my friend and I said, don't aim at the pin. It'll never stay on the green with the wind behind us. Mm-hmm. So I took the same club, same ball, aimed to the middle of the green, but I pushed it. It just barely, it hit on the downslope on the, cleared the trap, hit on the downslope, took one bounce and hit the flying stick and dropped in for another hole in one. So,
Whoa.
So I've only had, and I missed the 3rd one in the same round with that same ball by an 1/8 of an inch.
Oh my gosh.
So, but that's been 27 years ago. So I don't know that but I always
amazing.
Think, well, I think you have a special dispensation to tell a story like that, golf story. If the odds of it happening, whatever you did happening, are greater than 65 million to 1, and the odds are 67 million to 1 that you would. Someone would do that in the same round. So
better than the dinosaurs, John. You know?
Yeah. So like I said, I had an elevator speech and I worked it in between the 8th floor and the 1st floor. My partner's like, oh, I can't believe I heard this story so many times.
Uncle Steve, he would love to talk to you about that. Yeah, he's our favorite author, and he's been a great,
he's been a good guest, good friend,
Patreon kind of ours in a weird way, a benefactor in so many ways.
I'm familiar with the story, so it's
it does.
Hilarious. I mean, I could go on, but they're the only 2 that I ever had, and they came literally 10 minutes apart. So,
hey, John, I got a question for you.
Sure.
That is an awesome golf story.
That's great.
I thought I was so cool with my birdie like 20 years ago. You nailed it, John. I got a question for you. That's kind of it's a bit of a layered question. We have so many topics, and we're not going to be able to get to any of our questions at the time. But things like, you mentioned the Tower of Babel, and and the idea of maybe rebuilding Babylon. That they were hoping to do and having it be the seat of the UN, and then you look at all these things that are these convergence points that are happening now with Elon Musk and with transhumanism, and then things that you talk about like Neuralink, smart cities, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. And then later on, do you think later on with the Tower of Babel, do you think that we are headed towards another major point like that, as we've kind of talked about already, within our lifetime of having something that is so egregiously technologically advanced and prideful that it will cause God to basically spank
He's got to be talking about CERN.
us like he did at
Oh,
the Tower of Babel, for our own sake.
Yeah, I have no doubt that this is coming. I mean,
Yeah.
look, it's was one of the talks I have with some people tonight of like, we do these prophecy updates. And so back in
They're amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
We've been
well,
listening to them.
so in
all week.
2021, one of the first or one or two that I did in the year, I think it was like, okay, so how far are we going to get into 2021 before we say, I wish we could go back to the good old days of 2020 or in 2022, like, how far into the year were we? Like 3 days maybe before we said, could we go back to the good old days of 2021? And so, and I'll do it if I remember to do it in early 2023, like, could we go back to the good old days of 2022? I don't think we're ever going back at this point. I just don't see it. There's too much acceleration, convergence of all this stuff happening all
That
at once.
singularity kind of angle,
And some of it, and look, I don't know how successful these guys will be anyway.
Yeah.
But it's like, so what? So we have sat around and done the prophecy update in ancient Babel, chiseling on rocks. Like, well, I don't really think they'll ever get this tower built. That wasn't the point. The point is, what were they doing? What was behind it that was so egregious to God that he intervened in the human history at that time? And so the next time he intervenes, I think this is it. This is the end times where he comes and sets up his kingdom. Look, the stuff that I see, I don't even put a tenth of what I see into these updates. Wow. I mean, I could just sit there.
Dense. Very dense.
And I talk longer than a lot of guys, and that's just me. But I've threatened it. I'm just going to sit there with my news feed open on my iPhone and do an update someday. Because that's how it is.
Yeah.
So,
hey, if you guys have been enjoying this interview and you'd like to hear the rest of it, including some really down and dirty stuff that we're not allowed to say here on YouTube, head over to patreon.com/The Goslings. We'd love to have your support there and share exclusive content with you.
That's right. Keep it cool. And remember, these are interviews that strike down the darkness.
They do indeed strike down the darkness. They strike down all the darkness.
That's right. Strike it down hard.
So hard.
Amen.
We might have to redo that Patreon segment.
What's great about that? Like Nick may have missed his cue, but he totally redeemed himself.
I tried. I thought it was my cue though. It was
You got
embarrassing.
70 miles to the gallon on that.
I'll redo it. Not tonight.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple weeks. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
We'll let it ride.
If we start losing subscribers, then I'll definitely redo it.
Like, who are these two dorks?
Oh my gosh. Well, that was our interview with Sean Haller. And it was super informative. There's a whole lot more you can see, of course, Patreon, on the Patreon. But really appreciate everyone. Kim Masters joined.
Yeah.
You know what? As a matter of fact,
hang on.
A lot of experiments up there. Plutonium, nuclear weapon, nuclear destruction. They're just balls of light.
For joining us tonight. I'm still in 2017, it's 2018. It's January 7th, 2018 to be exact. And got a good show for you guys tonight, man. It's something I've been looking forward to for quite a while. We got Gary Wayne with us tonight, and we are going to be discussing so many things based on the Nephilim and Genesis 6, and all kinds of different things. It's going to be amazing, an amazing show tonight. I'm going to bring in Mark Eddy here in a bit. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be bringing in Gary on in just a few minutes. But I just want to thank everyone for sending me all the well wishes. As you can tell, I'm been under the weather quite a few days now. It's been more like 2 weeks, but it really, really smacked me hard right after the first of the new year, and I have no idea why. It just, man, I mean, there's people left and right just dropping like flies, man. They're so sick. It's ridiculous. I don't know what this bug is, but it's definitely engineered, man. I'll tell you why I believe that, because it's almost like you feel the effects of one bug, it starts to go away. Then you start feeling the effects of another bug, and then it starts going away. Then the effects of the last bug start coming back, but it's not as bad. And then so on and so on. It's just really, really ridiculous, man. And anyways, yeah, thank you, Kat, and everybody. Like I said, I really appreciate all you guys sending me well wishes and telling me to get better and stuff. And I've been off of social media for a little while, and I'm probably going to be off social media for a little bit longer so I can rest up some more. But yeah, I needed to get my strength for tonight. And for all those who don't know, we do Project Compass on Monday nights, Mark, Eddy, and I. And so yeah, and thanks, Nick, Champ out in Twitterverse, along with God of Thunder. Got Dennis and Yeg and Kat, Snark, all you guys in the Spreaker chat. Thanks
Welcome to the channel, Ryu.
for being here tonight. Oh, Gigi's here. Right on. Yo-ho. Yo-hoy, Gigi. Thanks for being here. But anyways, we're going to get the show started. And once again, thank you all for asking me to get better and sending your good vibes and healing and lights and everything, and greatly appreciate that. All right, so the call-in number for tonight's show is 1-415-891-9083. Again, the call-in number for the show tonight is 1-415-891-9083. And that's when the phone lines are open. Typically, it's after the first hour of the show, and we'll let you know when those lines are open.
Yeah.
And remember, this is a live show broadcasting from BeyondTheStrange.com. KTLK, The Fringe FM, TalkStream Live, and TuneIn Radio, all under The Fringe FM. You can always like or friend the show. All the links to social media are at BeyondTheStrange.com. For those of you in the Twitterverse, we are at Strange Days 2015, and we do trend with the hashtag BeyondTheStrange. Archives for the show are at Beyond the Strange YouTube channel. If you're listening on iTunes, give us a nice review if you enjoy the program. Great reviews always help the show. Beyond the Strange is on Stitcher and soon to be on Google Play as well. So keep checking the website for those updates. And also, if you want to donate to the show, which we greatly appreciate, everything helps. But while supplies last, anything over $20, a one-time donation of $20 or more will get you a BTS t-shirt and a book from the BTS library. And like I said, I said it before, I'll say it again. We don't give away janky books. We got some really good stuff. And all you got to do is go to the website, go to the donate button, then your information, send me an email to dave@beyondthestrange.com. Let me know the t-shirt size and your interest in books and topics and stuff, and see what we can get going there for you. But it's a great way to help the show. It's a great way to continue the show going. And like I said, all your donations are greatly appreciated. And we just really love you for all that. Okay, so thank you once again for doing that and being active and part of the show. Let me bring in my good buddy and yours, Mr. Mark Eddy. Mark, thank you for joining me tonight.
Yeah, well, it's time for me to say thank you again for thinking I know something about somebody's topic and let me speak about it.
I greatly appreciate it, man. And no, I know that you know, you and Gary go back a bit, so that's cool. And it's gonna
He's
be
a good guy. Yeah, I'm a very informative guy. It's gonna be a really fun 2 hours. I hope Gary can speak over the parrot screaming.
I hope I can too. I can barely talk right now, so. But anyways, it's going to be great, and everyone's looking forward to it, and as am I. And we're going to get Gary on here in a second, so I'm going to go ahead and just start doing the old bio, and we're going to get Gary on the line. Gary Wayne is a scholar of many religions, sacred texts. He has brought a lifetime of research to his recent publications of the Genesis 6 conspiracy, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind, who are the Nephilim, how they survived, and what is their legacy. Not a Twilight Zone fantasy, this is real biblical prophecy. Gary is with us for 2 hours to trace their ancient history up to today. So everyone, help me welcome for the first time at Beyond the Strange, Mr. Gary Wayne. Gary, how are you?
I am very good tonight and so happy to be with you and very much looking forward to our discussion tonight.
As am I, sir. And we have Mark with us. I was just going to say, Mark and Gary, you guys probably talked already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah. Hi, Gary. Just everyone just kick back and absorb all of Gary's information over the next couple hours. You know, we'll start seeing IQ points going up.
Nice.
It's gonna be a good one. Yeah. Dave, you want to start off, or I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is, like I said, again, this is the first time we've had Gary on the show, and we greatly appreciate that. And so, yeah, just for our audience, Gary, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, I've done over 30 years of research, you know, in terms of preparing to write this book and into biblical prophecy, and add a few more years on to finish writing the book and getting it published. And so, you know, my background is not from a theological perspective. I'm one of those contrarians, like I like to advertise, and I like to verify things for myself. So all of the research that I did was I came at it without using other people's research in the genre, or what people said it said about the Bible, or what people said it said about secret societies. I wanted to learn for myself. So I'm a self-taught person on this subject, and I think I've sort of written a narrative that connects most of the dots, even though you can't talk about everything in one book. I talk about a lot of things that connect the dots from, you know, the beginning of the secret societies, the mystical religions, the giants before the flood, to what's gone on through history and what is happening today and what they're planning to do in the future. So it's a very well annotated book in terms of the research. So my background has nothing to do with the subject. I did this while I was still working. That had nothing to do with the subject, and I did it all in my spare time.
That's excellent. And when we talk about the subject, we are definitely talking about the Nephilim and giants, the Watchers if you will, of Genesis.
We are, and that's sort of the base sort of starting point with it. Although it ventures into so many avenues and aspects as you sort of go down the rabbit holes, and they seem to be endless at times. But what you learn is everything is connected. But yes, I take things right back to the beginning in Genesis, what's recorded in Genesis 6, and some of the other fairly odd and seemingly at times out of place verses that are in Genesis, and provide some meaning to them. But what I also do is I bring in accounts from all around the world. So whether or not it's from the Vedas, their mythology, their religion, whether it's from the Ksha Maya, again out of the Popol Vuh, or their legends, or the Greek history and legends, or the Gnostic Gospels, I'll pull in all of those sources to build that base coming out of Genesis and what happens after the flood, and then carry that forward using historical records and other sources to bring out the whole sort of chain of events that takes place. So yes, it begins with Genesis 6, and it talks about the creation of the giants, and then it moves forward from there. And I like to call it it's following the sort of the bloodlines of the House of Dragons. So it's one of those things that's just loaded with allegories, but it does begin with the giants in Genesis 6 and the creation of the secret societies, at that time as well.
When you say the House of Dragons, Gary, is that in reference to Dracos, or what we in the paranormal community may call reptilians?
Well, sure, because it may be in a slightly different manner than what most people in the alien mythos will talk about in terms of reptilians, but certainly something similar, just as you have this being in the Garden of Eden, which is separate from these other creatures that are, descended from the seraphim angels. And I'm talking about serpent in Eden as being something that was an intelligent being. That was as big as a camel, according to the Gnostic Gospels. It could do all of the work required that humans would do for planting and farming. And it was, considered a kingly sort of beast of that time. And before it has its voice and its intelligence and its legs and its wings taken away, it's very much this draconian type of being, understanding that dragon, serpent, and crocodile in ancient mythology all goes back to the same sort of meaning. And so some of these beings with these serpents probably had wings. So you would have an animal with wings that looks like a serpent, which is a dragon. Now, if you look at a seraphim angel, that is, as you define that back in its Hebrew meanings, is a high-ranking angel that has the face of a snake. So it is this flying, godlike being, much like the feathered serpent that would be in Central America, that produces offspring that produces the Nephilim, who look just like them, only they don't have wings. They're just these giants, but they have the face of a snake at that time. So when you get into this whole ideology of reptilians, there is definitely a connection there that sort of again links into another mythos that's the alien mythos that you mentioned. But I wanted to mention the word watcher that's in there, that comes out of the first book of Enoch, and link in the word drakon or drakonta that comes out of Greek, the Greek language, and that means to watch, right? Just as the Egyptian Neter gods are the ones who watch, just as the Urshu gods of prehistory were the watchers and the intermediaries, and just as First Enoch talks about these seraphim angels as watchers. So this whole sort of dragon, serpent, god, giant imagery that goes and mixes in with the kingships around the world, because the Nephilim, created from this union of gods or fallen angels and human females, usurps the kingships around the world and use that as the divine right to rule, because they're the offspring of the gods.
Oh, awesome. Mark, did you want to ask Gary anything right now?
Oh, yeah. Gary, since we're getting started in the early stages of prehistory, what are some of the characteristics of the Nephilim rule on the earth?
You're asking what their role was in early prehistory?
Like when they ruled the earth,
Right.
like they were usually in power positions, correct?
Yeah, so they arrive in the Bible in about the 6th generation, the generation of Jared. Noah is also born in that period as well, and thereafter. And so it's well into prehistory that these demigods and these giants are produced. But because of their superior size, and they're just not 7 feet tall, they're not 8 feet tall, but these are monstrous beings. And some people think that they're as big as 20 to 40 feet in the first generation. Some people like to maybe mistranslate or misapply 300 ells or 300 cubits as the other translation goes out of Enoch to translate them to be over 400 feet or even bigger than that. But the standard sort of understanding is that they were 20 to 40 feet. In the Bible, we get Goliath, if you're taking him at a common cubit, he's going to be just around 10 feet. If you use a royal cubit, which all of the measurements for the buildings and the royal kings were used, that would put him closer to 11 feet. Og would have been using the same sort of standard, probably somewhere around 14 to 15 feet, with his bed being 15 to 16 feet long and made of iron because wood would have collapsed underneath it. So they had the ability to quickly take power just because of their extraordinary size. And so they usurped the kingships both before the flood and after the flood. And what they're doing in the 6th generation, which is important to understand, is they're now partnering with the other lineage in Genesis called the Cainite line. And what's going on in the Cainite line is that Cain passes on the 7 sacred sciences he learns in Eden according to the secret societies, and teaches Enoch, who develops these 7 sacred sciences into tremendous knowledge and understanding of the sciences and the development of the application thereof, and passes it down through his progeny. And by the time of Lamech, which is again of the lineage of Cain as opposed to the same name of the Lamech in the lineage of Seth, this is the Cain line I'm talking about, there's a revitalization of these sciences, and they create the secret societies. And that's where Freemasonry takes their history back to, according to Albert Mackey and the Legends of Enoch and the Legends of the Craft and all of the works that he has assembled out of their Polychronicon and prehistory. And taking Enoch, Cain, Tubal-Cain as examples of some of their greatest patriarchs. So Enoch also develops, as he's developing these sciences, he develops the mystical religion. So you have the mystical religions, that is the sun-worshipping religion, also known as the bull cult, that's being developed before the flood. That's developing these sciences to create some of the great monuments to worship their gods in prehistory. The descendants of Cain, and they're going to now partner with these giants that are created by the fallen angels in Genesis 6. And they are going to usurp the world, and they're going to enslave their balance of humankind. And the violence and the corruption that this partnership brings about is going to totally corrupt the antediluvian world. And you can see this organizational structure that goes right throughout mythology, right around the world. And typically, and I think the Ring Lords would be a good one, or the Lords of the Ring, as people would know, Tolkien bringing this antediluvian history to life with some artistic license and using more of the Norse mythology. But you have this ring of lords. This is a round table, as in King Arthur of kings that are ruling the antediluvian world of different species and giants. And so heavily weighted, obviously, by the Anunnaki, as they're called in Sumerian mythology, or the Titans in Greek mythology, that are the kings of the ring. And alongside them, and you see the imagery as well as with the wizards. The wizards represent the mystical religion I was talking about. And so this is that organizational structure that you have, and this is the same organizational structure that crosses the flood, as well as you have the mystery schools and the secret societies that are developed to advance certain aspects of this technology and knowledge. And Freemasonry takes their name from the fifth science of geometry that they actually call within the craft masonry. And so they take credit for the building of all of these ancient antediluvian monuments and buildings, including the pyramids. I'm not saying this is what they're saying, that were actually built from the knowledge that Enoch had developed and passed on.
That is awesome. I mean, I love getting into this stuff, Gary. It's great. For those of you who are in the Spreaker chat or even in Facebook or Twitter, remember to put your questions in caps for Gary, so I can see those a lot more clearly, and then I can get those questions to Gary, and then he can answer them for you. And we got about 5 minutes before we get to our first break, Gary. I just wanted to bring that up real quick. When you brought up the wizards, now is it safe to say that these are like King Arthur type wizards as well, like Modred or Merlin?
Yes, Merlin is actually a title for a priest of the sciences and the arts. So the arts and the sciences is actually what develops the magic, and the magic that's associated with wizards that has been part of that kind of characterization of it is derived from the word magi, right? Magi, magic, pretty easy connection there. And the Magi were part of the Mesopotamian priesthood after Babel. And after Babel, you have Nimrod going to Mesopotamia and reestablishing what he had done at Babel with the seven sciences and his mystical religion. Hermes partners with Ham, goes to Egypt and really establishes that religion. So all of this is connected back, and I'm probably going down a rabbit trail here, so I'll shorten it off and come back, is that according to the Masons, Hermes discovers the two pillars of Lamech, whom I just discovered, which has parts of the knowledge that is collected in the antediluvian epoch. And it also has directions to where his 9 vaults of 36,525 books of knowledge, according to Masonic records, other ones are less in number, that are buried under the pyramid. And he brings this knowledge and religion back to Nimrod, and he partners with Nimrod at Babel and manifests the sciences again, and they start building Babel City and Babel Tower from this knowledge, and he initiates 1,000 people into the mysteries. And we get a hint of this knowledge in the biblical account in Genesis, where God is saying something to, paraphrasing, speaking as one language, as one people, and working together. Nothing they try to do will be prevented from them doing. So we get a hint of that, and then God disperses the languages, and that's why you have Nimrod going to Mesopotamia, and you've got Hermes and Ham going to Egypt. This is the knowledge that comes across the flood. And so all of this understanding, as we come through history and prehistory and mythology, even up to the same time, when they're referring to the wizards, these are the priests of the mystical religion.
Right.
It's just been added with more sort of flair, but Merlin would be the typical archetypical description of one of those priests. And if you can imagine, let's say Moses or somebody else in the court of Pharaoh, and they're doing these magical tricks, well, these priests would have been wearing types of caps and things, just as the kings wore caps to cover their elongated skulls, but that's another rabbit hole in itself.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that's very That's very true. That's very true. Mark, we got about 2 minutes before the break. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah. How did the Nephilim survive the flood? That's intriguing. Because you do bring that up in your book.
Yeah, there's depending on which perspective you want to come at that from. It's not something I can answer in 2 minutes, but I'd love to answer that in full after the flood.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit of a long answer to give it justice.
Okay, wait. Okay, since we're down to 90 seconds or so, in like 700-800 pages in your book, you do cover a little bit of everything. Do a thorough job too. We've already touched on the King Arthur, the Grail legends. We'll be getting more into Atlantis, the Merovingian kings. I mean, you're giving us a whirlwind tour of our history, world history. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah, and essentially following the bloodlines as well. So it's a 6,000-year connect the dots investigation, as I said earlier, into the House of Dragon, of how, what they did in the flood, how they crossed the flood, and how they affected our history, and how they continue to affect us today. I put out a post earlier today on Facebook called, about the Knights of the Seraphim Order of the Swedish Kings, and link that back, the double cross, back to the Templars and all of the different types of kings and the different societies going back into prehistory, because it's about the bloodlines, right? And these bloodlines are still active today.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and we'll stop here, guys, and then we'll pick it up on the flip side. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. You are with us, and Gary Wayne and Mark Eddy. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Back our guest tonight, Mr. Gary Wayne. Gary, thank you for being on the show with us tonight.
Well, so happy to be back here. Hopefully what we're talking about is starting to catch the attention of the audience, because I know I just get so excited every time I talk about it.
Oh, yes, sir, indeed. And Mark, thank you also for joining us tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, I'm looking forward to the next 90 minutes.
And I just want to remind everyone, I do see your questions, and I'm going to get to them accordingly as much as possible. And one of the first questions, Gary, and I know we said we're going to get back to what we're talking about before, but before that, I do want to get to some of these questions. God of Thunder in Twitter would like to ask, if Adam and Eve were banished from Eden, how could Cain have learned the skills there?
So according to Masonic legends, is Adam was taught the 7 sacred sciences while still in Eden. And so this is pure knowledge, and it's all being used for good. After Eden, he has Cain, Abel, and Seth. And of course, Abel is murdered by Cain. But in the meantime, before Seth is born, Adam is providing this information and mentoring Cain and Abel until he dies. And then afterwards, he's going to mentor Seth. So with the 2 lineages thereof, you have the Cain line and the Seth line. The Seth line is going to continue to apply the knowledge, but in ways of good. And astronomy becomes their main focus, because they're an agrarian people, as it's described in Eden. Cain, though, he never really forgives God for his banishment and punishment, and starts to go more the way of evil, and they start to pervert the knowledge. And by the time he has Enoch, they have 2 and more working in the perversion of the sciences, and they're going to lead people away from God. They're going to not give God credit for anything, and they're going to use this knowledge to honor their pantheon of gods that they are accepting, which the person who's asking the question, God of Thunder, would recognize as the fallen angels, or the 7 gods that run most of the antediluvian civilizations that are mentioned throughout religions and mythology around the world.
Now, Donnie in Facebook, he made a comment and he wanted to know, were the Magi also known as scientists?
The Magi, yeah, they were the scientists, right? And they were developing it. And, you know, just as you have coming down through around the year 1600, you have in 1660 the establishment of the Royal Society. Well, these were the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists, as they like to call themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was created by Rosicrucians and Freemasons. So yes, they were developing the sciences, mm-hmm. and in sometimes in good ways. It's not the knowledge that is evil; it's the application of the knowledge. Is it being applied for good, or is it being applied for evil?
Very true. Very true. We also have some questions in the Spreaker chat, and Catalina would like to know, what does Gary think the real reason Cain slew Abel and was Seth's third son?
Jealousy.
Well, yes, I think Seth was definitely the third son. And I know there's some Gnostic accounts, and I'm familiar with the Makaseth, that a lot of the Gnostics like to take their ancestral heritage back, but this is a different being and a different creation than the Seth in the Bible. Cain is definitely, another son of Adam. I understand there's a lot of Kabbalism and Gnostic gospels out there that would suggest, and even the Targum has annotations in it, which is the verbal sort of things that the rabbis worked with the Old Testament in terms of teaching it. Would mention that Cain might have been a son of Satan or other angels, depending on which source you're going to use on that. But the reason that Cain, murders Abel is not given to us in a simple sort of way. It's not, there's no clear sort of motive other than Cain becomes very, very jealous because God is going to honor Abel for giving him the first fruits of everything. And in Cain's sacrifice, he doesn't provide the first fruits. He just gives them some of it. And in God's laws, just as there was taught in the ancient nation of Israel, is that you have to provide the first fruits, whether it's of animals or of plants as the sacrifice. And so that's why, in my conclusion from reading the Bible, that's why it was rejected. And so therefore, if you understand how blessings work in the Bible, that means you're going to get significant things coming forward and rights and inheritance that go on to your progeny. So if Cain doesn't receive the initial blessings in the way that he would have wanted to, he knows what the implication of that is. And for an example of that, we would look to Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac, and the blessings and the promises in the covenant made after the flood that are going to be set aside and implemented for their descendants. So the blessings is a very important part of this whole understanding of why Cain goes sideways. Instead of just sort of asking forgiveness and going forward the next time of presenting the first fruits, and not continuing to do evil and using anger as his method of resolving his issues. Things could have been differently, but they weren't. But that's, again, the only motives that I can dig out of Genesis to.
Yeah, Diane, and you've come with me on 4 different channels. You've seen them crush every channel I've had, and you're still with me. I really appreciate it, and I love hanging out with you.
Apply to the motive of Cain murdering Abel.
I gotcha. And one last follow-up question from Catalina as well. Do you feel that Cain might have had more of a reptilian brain than what we so-called have, that reptilian side in every human?
Yeah, no, not unless he was actually the son of Cain, or some of the seraphim angels, as some of the other accounts would have. No, I don't think so. I just think that, once Adam and Eve leave Eden, and after they've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they know both sides of the coin, right? And now they're going to participate, have to weigh things out in the physical world, which is corrupted, and they're going to have to find their own way. And not everybody's going to find their own way. People are going to be corrupted by the world, and I think that's what happens with Cain. And I would also suggest that I think this happened.
Diane, I remember that. Her name was Barbara. I don't know what it was. Her name was Barbara something, and she was timing everyone out, and she wouldn't come on the channel. So I had to con her and verbal her to make a comment so I could take a wrench off her. Do you remember that? Wow, that's right. I remember that now. Yeah, what a bee.
Even with the seraphim angels, the watchers, who are the governors of the antediluvian epoch, as they take on their worldly sort of shape or body, and they become corrupted and impassioned because they think the women are beautiful, and they have sex with any one of them that they please, and they produce, a violation against the laws of creation. They're putting the immortal angelic spirit into the physical world, into a physical body, and creating these demigods that have an immortal spirit. And so,
Diane, do you remember her though?
We also hear in other religions of the seraphims reacting from how the world seems to influence them as well. So the physical world will affect everybody that's in this world, and the only one who has overcome it has been one, and that would be Jesus.
I have a side question to well, actually, about what you just said. It's something that I've always wondered with, the sons of God laying with the daughters of men. And I was always under the impression that any angel didn't have the same anatomy as humans. So therefore, how could they even reproduce with a human or amongst themselves for that matter?
Well, I think that's a very good question. And in the pantheons around the world, you actually have gods mating with gods to produce the lower gods, right? So let's say you take the Greek mythology, you have the primordial gods, like Kronos and Gaius, and they're going to produce through their offspring other gods like Zeus and Poseidon, right? The second tier gods of Olympus, and those are the lower gods. And so if we understand these gods as angels and that they come from another dimension, these are spiritual beings. And so a lot of people will say, well, how does a spiritual being then have the ability to take a physical form and have sex and pass this DNA on to human females and create these giants? And a lot of people will also point to Matthew and say marriage is not made permitted in heaven, which is why this was such a great violation of the laws of creation in the physical world. So bringing that to sort of a conclusion, then we get all sorts of descriptions of angels in the Bible in different forms. Some of them are just like men, who people like Abraham don't even distinguish as being different from humans. Some that look like humans, but they're angels. Some that are dragon-like beings, as Satan is described in Revelation. Some are giant beings. Some are shining beings. And there's different orders of angels. And so we have all these different sort of descriptions of angels in sort of that physical understanding coming out of the Bible. So what's that telling us is that they somehow have the ability to take on a physical form in this world. And if we look at Jude 1:6, where these angels left their habitation goes back to a word in Greek, in the original Greek, called oikoterin, which means a dwelling place for the spirit. So they left the dwelling place for their spirit in heaven, and they come into the physical world. And I think they need to have a physical being to put their spirit into, to interact with the world. So somehow they're able to take this form, and somehow they're able to take any.
Yeah, Diane, I'm guilty of that too. If I'm on the tablet and he's streaming, I can't help but pop in and see the guys, what they say in the chat. And I actually miss some of the guys there because some of them were good friends.
Sex that they want, male or female. And this is not something that we see written sort of matter-of-factly out of the Bible. We have to put that information together, but we do understand that they did go to human females and they did have sex with human females, and they did produce the giants. So they obviously have the ability to take a human form. And I think that is something that they possess, just as other religions and the Kabbalah and other accounts all say that they have this changeling, shape-shifting ability in this world, and they can take any shape, form, or sex that they want.
Okay, very good. Mark, before the break, you were asking Gary about how did the Nephilim survive the flood? Is that correct?
Right, and we have like 15 minutes for the we only had 2. So, Gary, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I will, and I won't take 15 minutes with it, but
I have a lot of questions. Take as long as you want, but it saves some time. I have a lot more questions. So does the chat room. So we're just
We got
enjoying
another full hour after this. Don't worry.
yeah, we got lots of time. So in the Bible, what we read in Genesis 6 is that the giants were in those days and also after that. And we see giants recorded before the flood, and we also see them recorded after the flood. And they have different names. Nephilim only shows up in the original Hebrew 3 times, and it's translated in the King James as giants, in Numbers 13 twice for the Anakim, and in Genesis 6 where it says giants. If you take that back to Hebrew, it says Nephilim. So the names that are showing up after the flood are names like the Rephaim, the Emim, the Abim, the Ozim, the Anakim, Horim, Amalekite, and on and on and on and on. So all of these giants show up after the flood, but they don't tell us, the Bible does not tell us how they show up. We only know that it said that they were before and after, and then they show up. And also according to the flood, just so that the audience understands I'm not ignoring this, is that according to the Genesis account, everything on earth is destroyed in the flood. So how does this happen? Biblically, the best way for me to account for it is there is a second incursion, what I call it, after the flood that either happens at Sodom and sometime before Babel in terms of timing. So Sodom is one of the first cities that was formed after the flood. And we get an account out of the Gnostic Gospels of these giants being started at Sodom and Gomorrah as a replanting of this flower after the flood. So I would say that for biblically would be how my best way of doing it. My fallback position is that these Nephilim are not described in the Table of Nations in the Bible. They just show up out of nowhere. So they don't descend from the descendants of Noah. So we don't know how they were created, or that leads you to the understanding is, did they survive the flood? Because there's also some tribes like the Kenites and the Kenizzites and 4 or 5 other tribes that show up after the flood of either humans or hybrids that don't go back to the Table of Nations and the sons of Noah as well. So there are other people that show up that are unaccounted for in the Bible. So that means perhaps some of them did survive the flood. And biblically, if you want to go legally on that, in Genesis 6 and Genesis 7, God is saying he's going to destroy everything he created. Well, it's the fallen angels who create the Nephilim. So again, it goes on in Genesis 6. And also note that Genesis 6 is part of the flood narrative. So this isn't 2 different narratives. So the giants being created and the flood is all part of the same story. Now, if you go to other accounts, which is my second version, is somehow on an ark or off-world or in the earth, or somehow with the help of the fallen angels, because you can account.
Diane, you know I am too. I'm a bad stir. You know that.
Okay.
Had fun stirring. I call it trolling.
Account of another ark would come out of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh is a being that is, we understand, is created after the flood, and he is 2/3 God and 1/3 human. And the person who's telling the stories and his friend is Enkidu, who is also 2/3 God, 1/3 human. So these are archetypical giants. And we also, just as an anecdote, out of the Dead Sea Scrolls on 4Q531 through 534, you get accounts of the name of Gilgamesh before the flood out of the Book of Giants. But we don't know whether that's the same Gilgamesh or this new one just takes that name, which is sort of common. You have people taking names of giants before the flood that live after the flood. So that's not unusual. So he could be created after the flood or not. But who they talk about is Utnapishtim. And some people will know that as Ziusudra, depending which translation you're using. And this is the Ark story. This is the flood story of the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians. But Utnapishtim is also the archetypical Anunnaki or Nephilim. He's 2/3 God and 1/3 human, just like the whole family that he takes with him. So when you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, on the macro level, it's telling the same story. But on the micro level, as you get into the details, they're completely different. And you have a survival story on an ark of the Nephilim, and you have a survival story in Genesis of the human story, survival with Noah. And that's not an unusual sort of understanding. So if you go over to Greek mythology, just to give one more example, is you have Deucalion and Pyrrha. And they are the two survivors of the flood on an ark, very similar to the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the thing is that Deucalion is the son of Prometheus, who's a Titan, either a Titan Nephilim or a Titan god at that second tier of gods that I mentioned a little earlier. So whichever the case is, this is another Nephilim survival story. So I kind of look at it as my second fallback position is on an ark, because it seems to be telling a parallel account of the same disaster. And if you look, it doesn't matter whether or not it's in Native American, doesn't matter whether you go to Central America, South America, all around the world, all continents, all cultures, all religions have mythologies and religious accounts of giants being created who destroy the world. A flood comes and some of them survive, along with some humans also survive in a separate story. So it seems to me that that would be, just judging by the volume of evidence around the world, that would be my second position. Other people suggest that somehow some of the members on the ark were giants, or they had the DNA of giants that started the giants afterwards, but it doesn't make any sense. What happens is with the Canaanites who they're talking about, they actually go intermarry in with the Rephaim and Anakim and produce the hybrid giants like the Amorites. So I recognize that as a possibility, but that's my third choice. And in the middle there, there's a story of people surviving in some of the mythoses within the earth or in spaceships off the earth. That's all I suppose possible with angelic help as well, but I lean more towards the ark.
Gary, I got a question about Machu Picchu. Some have said that it's possible that giants helped create the landscape of Machu Picchu because of the floods. Would you know anything about that?
Well, there's certainly speculation to that. And, the technology at Machu Picchu is way beyond what we can even do today. Care what anybody says, we can't do it today. And so it just tells you the level of technology at some time in the past that was actually there and how powerful the development of these sciences actually were. Now, there are some people that say that it's the giants who built all of the ancient monuments. But prehistory tells us two different phases. One is the gods create the first major cities at somewhere around 10,000 BC, whether or not it's Jericho or Uruk or any of the cities around the world. And that may include Machu Picchu, and that they brought in the humans when they started to civilize them and teach them into these cities to work for them and to worship them. And then there's a second level of building that goes on after with the development of the humans and then developing of the sciences and being helped with by the eight fallen angels to take this knowledge with additional illicit knowledge to a whole new level. So Machu Picchu, I don't know how far back that gets dated, but the accuracy of what that's being built at, it would almost seem like that would be a godlike structure that's being built. But I do not dismiss what the Freemasons talk about Enoch and the different worlds, and they credit Enoch with building the pyramids, or at least supplying the knowledge to do that. And in the employment of building it, that they used some Nephilim, and perhaps there were some Nephilim being employed, but that's more.
Diane, you remember Chief Wiggum posting that one where Em was drunk saying, "Do you know who I am?"
After.
Yeah, I drink a lot, and I control my drink, and I don't carry on like that when I'm drunk. I don't get drunk, but I don't carry on like that at any time.
Like at Babel, it seems to be a little bit more realistic that they would be employed there, because you have to understand that before the flood, the kings of the earth, when this
the truth does come out, Diane. You're 100% right.
Building was going on, were the giants. So why would they do the building? They would use their slaves to do that, right? Now, they may have had some giants enslaved to do it, but typically they were all running their own realms.
I got you. Mark has a quick question before we go to our next break. And Joe Roop in the speaker chat has a question. We'll get to that definitely after the break, maybe even get him in a phone call or so. But go ahead, Mark, ask your question to Gary.
Okay. Gary, your book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, contrasts, with some of the anthropological books. Is there a way where you can reconcile Goliath and the biblical Og's bed and the biblical giants with the books like Dr. Webb's The Dover Mound that mentions a giant found in northern Kentucky? It's just more just straight out archaeological science reporting. Is there a way that you feel that these two disciplines need to be reconciled, or are we just really just talking about the same people?
I think they are the same people, and most of the excavations in North America of these giants are, not as tall as like the ones in Goliath is, but there are diggings of ones that are 10, 11, 12 feet. So not all of them are at the 7 to 9 feet sort of level. But sort of the connection gets to be is this: these are sort of red-haired skulls that are being pulled out of these giants in North America. And what's interesting about that is from the Middle East, in terms of the two types of giants that seem to be the most common, there were two varieties. One had blonde hair and blue eyes, and the other one had red hair and hazel eyes. And sort of how that mythology goes is that these are the two off and on. One moves up to Germany, Russia, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the red-haired, hazel-eyed ones move over to Ireland. But as they're being pushed out of the Middle East by the humans over time,
I think he was glad to see the back of me because I was always pushing Jesus, and he'd always ignore the Jesus comments. I knew he wasn't Christian, and he even said, talking about me, that Colin knew I wasn't a Christian. But I didn't like how he pretended to be a Christian when it suited him. That's when I started not liking him.
No, they're going to maintain control of the kingships. Sort of the rogue giants are being run out of the Middle East, and they migrate. They migrate to Europe. They probably migrate across the ocean. So I think when we see these red-haired skeletons being dug up in archaeology, and they're of more recent history, I think those are the descendants of these giants that fled the Middle East.
Interesting stuff. Okay, Gary, we have under 2 minutes. I don't think we have Joe. Joe will probably call in second out. Gary, do you want to tell us how to get your book or get in touch with you if people have questions after the show?
Sure. And if somebody does get a hold of me with a question or a comment that I feel I can add something to, I will get back to you. I'm very good at doing that. You can get a hold of me through my website, through the email there. That's at the Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis 6 with the number 6 conspiracy.com. I also have a generous excerpt on all 98 chapters, so you can get a good flavor for the book. And if you're interested in buying a signed copy, you can go there or link to Barnes & Noble and Amazon to purchase there as well. You can also follow me or ask me questions on Facebook under Gary Wayne, and I have a couple Genesis 6 conspiracies. And you can also follow me or comment or ask me questions on Twitter at Gary Wayne 63, at Gary Wayne 63. And my book is available through all online bookstores, Amazon, as I mentioned, .ca, .uk, .com around the world, BarnesandNoble.com, and through bookstores, but you'll have to order it in, likely distributed through Bookmasters.
Very good. All right. All right, everyone, we're going to take our second break right now, and we are speaking with Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Mr. Gary Wayne and Mark Eddy. I'm Dave Cruz. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Okay, this is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. And remember, you can follow the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Spreaker, all under Beyond the Strange. We're on Twitter at StrangeDays2015, trending with the hashtag Beyond the Strange. Follow us on Instagram as well. And you can always listen to the program live every Sunday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, I know.
And if you missed a show, you can
Oh,
go
good
to
days,
Apple
weren't they,
iTunes.
Phil?
It's free. And download the show from there. And always go to beyondthestrange.com for all your info, links, and information you might have missed. And it's a good site to go to. Just check it out, and it's all good. I want to thank Gary one more time, Mr. Gary Wayne, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and Mark Eddy for being with me tonight. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight.
We've still got 50 minutes to go on this one.
Well, glad to be here.
A lot of fun. Glad to be here. Glad you invited me.
Me too, man. And,
Yeah, they were, Phil.
You know, it's funny because I always learn something new about giants, you know, and I think it's an important topic because a lot of people still come across, you know, these subjects in different parts of the world. One of the interesting articles I saw recently, and I think they talked about it maybe on Coast to Coast, was that there might have been a giant sighting in Afghanistan. I can't remember how long ago this was, but do you remember anything about that, Gary?
Yeah, I actually listened to that. It's a riveting interview, and Steve Quayle, I believe, as my memory recalls, has a pilot on there who was witnessing it, and he is describing it. And again, one of the things I was happy to hear it was a lot of the details in terms of the size and the smell and the strength and the dexterity of this monster that they were trying to kill matches up very much with what my research found. So either it was a very well detailed and researched hoax, or it's an accurate account, and everybody has to make their own sort of descriptions on it. But again, it had red hair, and it killed a lot of soldiers because it had the ability to move quickly and to throw things and rip people apart, and just it was just a monstrous sort of being. And they estimated the weight at being somewhere between 12 and 1,500 pounds, as I understand.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a monster, right?
Yeah.
Right. And if it's true, and the details provided were very, very good, whether or not it was from an army perspective and a tactical perspective or a giant perspective. So yeah, it was riveting. I suggest people look.
You know what, Phil? If I could, I'd sort of talk back, like make it up to him. Not make it up, but I like them, and you know, I wouldn't mind being friends with him again. But when we had the fallout, I must admit, I'm not proud of it. I said some really nasty things, and the things I said, I can't really come back from, and I don't blame him if he doesn't want to know me. By the same token, life goes on. You learn.
Look for it on it, and it's it's readily available. You just sort of Google
Yep,
that
Diane, that's how I
on
look
the
at it.
internet.
Yeah, and they have a sort of a rendering, if you will. It's not really a picture; it's more like a sketch. And they have this sketch of the squadron all standing around this blue-skinned giant with red hair, and it might have even had the extra digits on the hands and toes. I don't recall, but
It did. It had the 6 fingers and 6 toes and a double row of teeth.
it's a very interesting looking beast, if you will. It's blue skin. Is that something that's typically found with giants?
Not that I'm aware of, but again,
No, there was no blue skin. Are they talking about the Kandahar giant? There was no blue skin.
I haven't seen the skin, and I haven't seen any descriptions of a blue colored skin. So I don't know whether or not it was because most of the descriptions of the Nephilim, at least in the Western and the Northern hemisphere, are a very, very pale white skin. Lots of hair, but very, very pale. So the blue could be just that it was dead, right? And it but I've not heard the blue color in that account, but I'm not discounting that either.
Yeah, that's a good point. It could have been dead, blue from being dead or something like that. That's true.
Yeah.
I am waiting for my my buddy and my partner here, Joe Root, to call in. I'm not sure if he might be on now. We'll see in a second, but he has a pretty good question, and you'll be very impressed with his questioning. But I do got a quick question from Twitter, and it does come from Deb Russo Matt, who's in there, and a couple of quick questions, as a matter of fact. You might have already talked about how big giants were, but I think she missed it. Can you give us approximate size and dimensions of these giants?
Yes, the original ones are said to be 20 to 40 feet tall by most people's accounts. Maybe they were bigger, but that's sort of where the consensus is. And Amos has a reference to the Amorites, that they were as large as the cedars of Lebanon. And cedars of Lebanon are the giant trees that they used to build all of the ancient structures out of when they needed these huge wood beams. They grew from 36 to about 50 feet. We don't get anything like that biblically that they were that tall, and I don't have any historical annotations that I found that I could ascribe to that after the flood. But understand, there's 2 different sets, one before and after the flood. Out of secular history, we have accounts of them, being 11 and 12 feet tall, about the tallest that I could get out of secular history. 11 foot 3 inches recorded by Passio and Second Delia, and lots of 10-foot ones.
Okay, and then another question from Deb is, it's actually a rainbow question, and it has to do with the flood. It has to do with promises. And was that more of a metaphor type of symbology, or what can you tell us about the rainbow in the Bible?
Well, it's used as a sign of the covenant to Noah, that God promises never to destroy the world again via water. And even in the end time, whether or not it's from other religions around the world or it's out of the Bible, the destruction is going to come by fire this time, not by water. So typically that's what it's used for. It does branch off in mythology and other understandings to a whole bunch of different things, but out of the Bible, that's the message.
Okay, and last question from Deb Russo Matt.
Wow.
The Twitterverse. It has to do with tithing. What can?
Wow, 16 dead already. And they said on the news that California is completely waterlogged, but there's 10 days of heavy rain coming.
Tell us about about tithing.
Well, it's a tithing really is about a 10% offering to God, and it was part of all your income or what you grew or what you produced, that you would give 10% of everything to God, and it was part of the covenant that was created, that was passed down in incorporating the Noah covenant that we just talked about, to the nation of Israel when they're formed at the time of Moses and the Exodus, and become a nation. And so all 10% of everything they produced was to go to God and the priesthood to help them live and to do good works and to sacrifice, to do their sacrifices for God. And so we need to understand that in the context of Old Testament law, that Israel was a nation of priests, set aside to be a nation of priests for God. And so if you're part of the Christian ideology, you're free from the law. And James only laid down essentially, 3 laws other than our faith that we needed to follow as a minimum. But there's a good...
Guys, Steve Cioccolani, that Asian dude from Australia that I play sometimes? He says there's different judgments for different sins. And he says the floods are related to sexual sin. And it's funny how California is getting drowned now, isn't it? He actually said floods are related to sexual sin.
Case also to be made that if you have the Spirit in you, you will be led to fulfill the law. So there's nothing wrong with either tithing or not tithing, but it needs to be what you want to do. But it's an interesting concept that still resonates today. That's for sure.
Right. Thank you very much for answering that, by the way, Gary. And Mark, I know you have a quick question you want to ask Gary. I'm still waiting for Joe to pop up on Skype and let me know if he's ready to speak with Gary. So why don't you go ahead and ask your question to Gary.
Okay. I have Cassie, one of my students, is listening, so I have to sound scholarly for her. But Gary, when I was like 12 or 13, it's like the Omen 2 movies were just coming out on HBO when that was just getting started in the late 70s or so. But I remember it's like you see these passages in movies like that, and you go and look it up in the Bible. It's like, oh, there it is. Those movies really aren't that made up. And in your book, you have a lot of information in there from the Old and New Testament, and you ask us to look at the Book of Wisdom. And you don't hear that one quoted very much. You have the Book of Daniel and the prophecies mentioned throughout your book. I think one of the really intriguing aspects of the Genesis 6 conspiracy is that you get us looking back to the Bible for like the history of the early stages of human history, like you did in the Book of Wisdom. Daniel's looking at a lot of prophecy, as well as the Book of Revelation. Do you find that?
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
All of that information.
Yeah, Diane, I end up playing a lot of his stuff because he is good, isn't he? I'll look up some more stuff to show of his.
Is coming true?
Oh, I think so. And what I would preface that with as well is that if you want to understand what is going on today with the secret societies and the New World Order, and what they're planning is you need to go back into history and prehistory and learn what happened before.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen in the future has happened before, and that they've tried to bring it about many times. And by going through prehistory, you're going to understand the language that they're talking in and what that means. And so, if you want to understand how the Antichrist is going to come about, you need to understand that these Nephilim bloodlines that I was talking about, whether or not it took.
Yeah, you're right, Phil. As soon as I said Steve Cioccolani says floods are for sexual sins, I thought, what about Sodom and Gomorrah? So it's interesting, though. We do know floods are judgments anyway. And all the floods all over the world, the last 2 years, every nation's had major floods. India's crops are lost. Pakistan, China, they've all lost their crops. And there's floods everywhere, as in the days of Noah. That's why there's floods everywhere.
Out to be the actual Antichrist or not, they are trying to present the world with their Messiah that descends back to the bloodlines of the Nephilim and the fallen angels. And that when you see those movies, as you mentioned with Damien, which is an interesting name in itself on the play on words, as in demon, you have guardians that are looking after this Antichrist type figure that is trying to rise to power. Mm-hmm. And this is not an unusual concept in the secret societies. In fact, they write that they keep 3 Antichrist figures mentored from birth on hand all of the time, waiting for the opportunity to put their Antichrist on the world throne. They would love to do it before the ordained time, but they will accept the ordained time if that's all that's available to them, and that it will be. And so what they tend to do as well is they tell us what they're going to do before they do it. And it seems to be, again, another one of those interesting sort of obligations that they seem to have, that they have to forewarn how they're going to deceive us. But this is exactly what they're trying to do, and they take their genealogies through the royal families and very powerful families that are maybe not on a throne today, but are royal bloodlines and are the pure bloods, or at least as pure as they've been able to keep them. And they take those genealogies and have records thereof to take them right back into prehistory.
Yeah, you do mention these guardians. That was really intriguing. But I know Joe.
Yes, wanted to just introduce Joe Roop, who's joined us in the Skype. Joe, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How you doing, brother? Do you have a question? You do have a question for Gary. What am I talking about? Go ahead. I'm still sick, man.
That's cool. My main question is that do you believe that the Gnostic texts, like the Nag Hammadi library, especially the Sethian texts, hold water? Because when I read them, they don't interpret at all like other theological books. It's almost like plain English. It doesn't even look the same.
Yeah, I mean the Sethian books. I mean, the Nag Hammadi has a lot of different books, and there's a lot of different Gnostic texts out there. I think these are quite well written books, but also understand though that the Gnostics, what they're doing at the time of, say, around 200 BC to 200 or 300 years into the Common Era, they're collecting writings from around the world, and they're creating a whole new cosmology that I like to call global Gnosticism. And so they write a lot of different books. Not all of them are consistent with each other, but directionally they're all quite similar. And what's interesting about the Sethian books, and I don't know whether you're familiar with Amaka Seth, but he is another race of giants recorded by the Gnostics, who they would look at as sort of being the father of the Gnostic race, as they like to call themselves, and that it is this divine spark or this DNA or this bloodline from Amaka Seth that they like to call is the 1,000 points of light that they're trying to bring back together in the end time or the new age, and vibrate in a harmonic conversion with the universal government and religion to evolve into godhood. And Amaka Seth is not created in sort of the same way as some of the other giant races are created, and he's also saved within a cloud off the from the flood, just as he's created in a cloud in the Amaka Seth accounts in the Gnostic scriptures. So they have some very, very interesting accounts, and as I said, they're not always consistent, but they are telling parallel accounts in a lot of cases, what I think might be their history from both before and after the flood.
Good enough for me.
I was wondering what happened there. Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
Well, the Gnostic texts are confusing to me because there's a lot of different, just like you said, there's a lot of different texts from a lot of different sources. Some say that Yahweh was actually the evil guy, and they quote Jesus. It's like they got a whole nother story for Jesus.
Well, they
the
do.
One that we're used to,
They do, and you need to understand that the religion of the secret societies is Gnosticism. So if you want to understand more about secret societies, right? Okay, so, and in the Gnosticism and in the polytheist religions, you have this dualism, good versus evil. So in that religion, you have them bringing the omnipotent God down, that's recorded in the Bible, down to the same level of power as Satan is, or Hell as it transfers out of Hebrew in Isaiah 14:12. They like to call him Lucifer, but that's a Latin word. It doesn't belong there. No other translation other than the King James Bible will use Lucifer. And so this is this constant sort of struggle that's always in balance, that they're trying to win this realm is basically the thrust of what they're trying to do with bringing on the new age and the end time. And what people don't understand is that these secret societies, they want to bring on this rendezvous with destiny. They want to bring about the end time. They want to have this showdown with God because they believe they can win. That's because they believe that God isn't this omnipotent God of the universe. He's just one of other archons or angels, as they like to say, that became arrogant and said there was none besides them. And it isn't even considered in Gnosticism one of the primordial creator gods. And as I recall in Gnosticism, and I'd have to check the book, but I'm not going to try and name it off the top of my head, but Sophia is the one who creates the marriage.
Yeah, you're right on. The world rulers, even in the second treatise of Seth, when he talks about a voice of the ruler came to the angels, and he quotes like, I am God and there is no other but me. And he said, but I laughed joyfully when I examined his conceit. So yeah, you're spot on. It's confusing though. You got to look at both sides of the coin, I think.
Yeah, and so whether or not it's Demerit or it is Adonai, and Adonai is Adonis out of the Middle East area as a god, that's the god or the angel that the Freemasons would equate with the God of the Bible.
Adonai. Right.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm done.
You're done. I always like bringing Joe on, man. He's got great questions of Gnosticism and all different topics of mystery schools and all that. So it's always great to have Joe on the show, man. Thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, Gary, let's take a little detour from the Giants, and I think your response, would tie into a recent show Dave and I did with Varla Ventura, but your book also touches on fairies and little people.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's not all about giants. It's these other people or creatures from mythology, and we do have examples of little people in the archaeological literature. Dr. Webb mentions a couple being found in Kentucky. Gary, how do the little people fit into the Genesis 6 conspiracy?
Well, just as I think it was Tolkien who wrote that, just as there's prehistory and all this different information that comes out of prehistory, there are also the elves, and he truly believed that. Well, this idea of fairies is a constitutive understanding in terms of how other organizations and religions around the world view things. And so that I don't lose the listener here, let me first of all say there are 4 categories of fairies. You've got the opalescent fairies. These are the ones that either came from planets or from other dimensions, and they're what we would know typically as a god or a fallen angel, and they're led by the rebellious one, and they come from, as I said, another area, and they produce through human females the earthborn fairies, and these are the shining ones, just as the Anunnaki are called the shining ones. And in this case, typically you get most of this shining being out of the Tuatha De Danann, because they were the fairy people. And the Tuatha De Danann also take their, as I mentioned earlier in the show, their migration back to the Middle East and Scythia in particularly, where that belief system believes Tartarus was located in and around Transylvania and that whole area. And that's where they escaped out of it. And if people remember in Greek mythology, the rebellious Titans were sentenced to Tartarus. And so they're thought to escape after the flood out of there in that sort of understanding. So these are the earthborn fairies, the giants, the Tuatha De Danann. And they're very much connected to, as I said, the giants in the Middle East. Then you have the third kind, which are like banshees and ghosts and demons and phantoms. These are the bodiless spirits of the earthborn fairies, and or the bodiless spirits of the Nephilim, because they were given the immortal spirit that I mentioned earlier in the show, but God steps in Genesis 6 and limits all life to 120 years going forward. But the original generation has these immortal spirits that were passed on from the gods or the fallen angels, depending on which religious or mythological perspective you're going to come from. But the bodies died, but the spirit doesn't. And the spirit's not permitted to go to sleep. And it's not allowed to go to heaven. So it wanders the earth, and they thirst for bodies, just as Jesus talks about in the 4 Gospels, to possess a body. The 4th class are the elementals. And the elementals are divided into 3 categories, and these are the little people. So you have the ugly ones that are like gnomes and dwarves and goblins and creatures like that. And there's many different kinds under each subcategory. And in these 3 categories, that's a common splitting up, whether it's in North America with native legends or around the world, of these little people into 3 different groups. Then you have the good-looking ones. So you have some good-looking elves, like you see in Tolkien, and you also have like a Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. These are good-looking little ones, and many subcategories in there. And then you also have the mischievous ones. So you have ones like, the leprechauns, for example, and are much associated with the rainbow, because this is about before the flood, and the treasure at the end of the rainbow is this lost knowledge that comes from the antediluvian epoch, known also as the pearls of wisdom and the golden fleece and the hall of records and the golden apples and the tables of the destiny and the emerald tablet and the Shatia, and on and on and on and on with all these different mythologies. It's not money, it's actually knowledge that is at the end of that rainbow. And what's interesting about this fairy mythology is it also links into the alien mythology, particularly with one category in the ugly ones in the gnome classification. And gnomes are also the ones that would work with the wizards in prehistory to keep the knowledge and protect the knowledge and keep the genealogy. All of the little people had specific roles, just as dwarves would make weapons and things for people. And that's why when you see elves making things with Santa, which is just another fairy story, they have these skills and they produce things for the gods. But within the ugly classification, you have this one group that has flying machines. It comes through portals and has great technology, kidnaps people, does experimentation on them, and then returns them after a fortnight. And they come through, as I say, these portals or these fairy dolmens, and dolmen just means portals or shays, and fairy mounds are known by different names for these portals that are around the world. And the people don't remember anything after being kidnapped. And I put one of these examples in the book just as an example, because if you didn't know it was a fairy abduction, you would swear it was a great alien abduction. And they're also called the Greys, the Grey fairies, the Grey neighbors, Grey something or other. And I think this whole ideology of the aliens as being around since prehistory is likely true based on the technology that was developed in the antediluvian epoch, just as reptilians are another order of some of those species.
Gentlemen, thank you for that explanation, Gary. I'm so sorry we missed the mark on the commercial, so we're going to do that right now. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Everyone, this is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all for being here tonight in this fascinating topic. It's been a wonderful evening with Gary and Mark, and it's just been really great. I mean, the time is just flying right by, and just remind everyone that tomorrow night Mark and I will be on Project Compass, and we have David Brody with us, and we're going to be speaking about Atlantis and all kinds of different things. It's going to be another fascinating evening, so you don't want to miss that right here on the Fringe FM, and that will be at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. So don't miss that. It's gonna be a wonderful, wonderful evening tomorrow night as well. But tonight we want to get back to Genesis 6 conspiracy. We are speaking with Gary Wayne and Mr. Mark Eddy. Thank you, gentlemen, again for being on the show.
Hi, Earl. Yeah, and Gary, you wanted to wrap up with what are the allegories of the fairies?
Yes.
Yes. And it's important to understand the physical aspect and the genealogies and how that sort of plays in with secret societies and the descendants of giants and the religions, but also you need to understand the allegorical side, just as the Gnostics believe in the elven bloodline of the Shining Ones, which is the Tuatha Dé Danann that go back to the Middle East through Scythia. And part of that whole sort of Gnostic religion, understand that there are four main sort of allegories to these bloodlines. And from that matriarchal side, you have fairies and owls. And these are the allegories they use to associate with the matriarchal following of these genealogies throughout history. So when you have a fairy queen, as in Guinevere, for example, and out of King Arthur in that story, I mean, what they're doing is through their literature is they're chronologically laying out their legacy and their history of the bloodlines of these and the descendants of the Nephilim from the matriarchal side. They use similar allegories for the patriarchal or the male side, and that will come through dragon and through ravens. And that's why you see those four allegories used over and over and over worldwide. And there's no coincidence why you then have, sorry to interject, why you have vampire tales being related to, Dracula, because, Dracula is, Dracul is a dragon, and you put the A on, that means the son of a dragon. And so when you're talking about blood drinking, that's a Nephilim sin of the antediluvian epoch, as they slaughtered humans and ate humans, and they used to drink blood to advance their cognitive abilities and try to extend their life. And those teeth on the vampire is the cobra, which is back to the serpent imagery. You get the cobra imagery coming through the Egyptian Nephilim kings of pharaohs, just as you have the same thing going through with the subcontinent of India, with the kingships descending down from the Nagas, who were also these serpent type of gods that produced these Nephilim serpent-like kings. And Naga goes back to the word cobra. And of course, that blood gives the vampire immortality. And of course, it's the mortal enemy of Christianity. So the allegories that they use are pervasive and everywhere, and they're commonplace. But what's hidden underneath, as with all fairy tales, as both Lewis and Tolkien will talk about, is the real meaning that the occultists understand.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and yeah, there's also all the serpent imagery from Central America, Mexico as well. It's just all over the world.
All the gods and all of the kings had serpent or dragon imagery, and as I mentioned earlier, is in antiquity, the dragon and the serpent were the same understood being, just as the crocodile was in some other, like the Egyptian mythology and religion, who was also named Draco, by the way.
There you go. Cool. Well, Gary, I got a quick question, really quick, before we, I mean, we still have 20 minutes before we end the show, but
yeah.
I want to.
Oh, and just in case somebody double checks, he's also called Sobek in some other accounts. In case somebody questions, in there's Sobek and there's Draco.
Gotcha.
Yes. Wow.
What one of the titles, of course, of this show and of your material is Genesis 6 Conspiracy. What exactly is the conspiracy, and why is it important that people need to know this today? You do seem to say that the Nephilim is going to be returning. Is that correct?
Yep.
Well, a lot of people think that, and I certainly hold that as a possibility that you could have another recreation of the Nephilim coming in the end time, whether it's through DNA manipulation or copulation, again, however it comes about, transhumanism, all sorts of different ways you could create a superhuman or the new man concept. But I think it's, from my point of view, it's more likely to come from the descendants of the Nephilim through the bloodlines, in terms of how they're going to take over the world and split it into 10 empires. It's like the Atlantean Empire, which had more than just the island continent, has actually had 10 kings. And in the Atlantean mythology, you have Poseidon mating with Clymene, producing 10 Titan Nephilim kings to reign over it, which Atlas ruled over Atlantis. And what they're trying to do was create a world empire. Now, in Plato, he writes that the Athenians defeated it, but what they're trying to do is recreate the new Atlantis in the end time, which is also known as the New Age. So the whole understanding is that the first apocalypse by water is going to be like the apocalypse of the end time by fire, where we're going to see this come about again. But I think it's more or less through the 10 empires that they're trying to set up through the secret societies and the descendants of these Nephilim, who control the secret societies through the purebloods. Because if you get into the Rosicrucians, for example, you've got a split. About half of them, the top level, are purebloods. The other ones are highly initiated and probably some of the bloodlines, but they're not considered the ones that are going to answer or be representative of the actual families. And so what they're trying to do is create this 10-nation empire, and they created the Club of Rome in the late 60s and started to see some of their influence by the early 70s, who have split the world up into these 10 groups of nations or blocks of nations or trading blocks or spheres of influence, whatever you want to call it, to set up the New World Order. So they're working on it, and they're working on it with their own imagery, just as Francis Bacon wrote about this in his book, without coincidence, called The New Atlantis, where in the end time you would have the universal religion of the Rosicrucians, which is Gnosticism and polytheism, that's going to work in harmony with science and ruled over by the royal bloodlines, and into this sort of new age and utopian society.
Yeah, I'm waiting for something drastic to happen with the New World Order showing up. I mean, we got little hints here and there. I mean, you follow history, of course. You know that there's been civilizations that were definitely before us. You know, you have Atlantis. You have other civilizations like God, I can't even think of the name off the top of my head. I'm still a little fuzzy, but you know, it's.
You have Mu.
You got Mu.
You
Yeah.
have Asgard. You have Lemuria. You have Sumeria. Depending on who you talk to, there was 4 to 9 ancient civilizations, and some people believe that Lemuria was the parent civilization that spawned the 7 ones that came afterwards. But
where I was going with that is, how much farther do we need to actually? I mean, is this a continuous thing that's going to keep happening? I mean, is the New World Order already here? Has it always been here?
Well, it's always been here, but not in total control, and it won't be. I mean, it certainly has tried over and over and over and over, and certainly at the time of Babel, that's why you have the dispersion of the people and the confusion of the languages, because the people were so few and the time wasn't right. But from a Christian perspective, where I come from, is that this can't happen, even though they're trying, until the restrainer is removed. And so we won't see it until the ordained time. So they keep marching it forward. Looks like they're getting close, and then things like Brexit happen, or Trump comes along, or all of these different sort of stumbling blocks that just when they think they're getting close, it sort of gets pushed back again. And I also think it's going to take some significant catastrophes and some sort of significant revelations and things to be brought out before they can actually get over the hump.
Do you think that that a lot of this this devastation that we've witnessed, especially in 2017 with the hurricanes and some of the earthquakes and wildfires and a lot of these things that would seem natural, are quite possibly man-made to create a distraction or something, if you will?
I think probably both. What they certainly don't want to do is give it sort of any biblical sort of elevation to it, because if you understand prophecy, we're going to have more earthquakes, we're going to have more hurricanes, we're going to have natural disasters, right? Those are the birth pangs, and they're going to get ever more intense.
And this is 3 years ago, guys, and look how worse it's gotten since. This is 3 years old.
As we get closer. But I also think there's contrived things going on. And they're going to do everything to lead people to the reasons why it's happening, which is going to actually help them to try and bring about the New World Order, because they bring everything back to this old sort of thing as well. If we don't stop consuming, we're going to pollute ourselves and destroy ourselves from the face of the earth. If we don't stop consuming and using vehicles and airplanes, then we're going to have an apocalyptic greenhouse effect, or we're going to destroy ourselves from the face of the earth through nuclear. And all of these things are designed to transcend borders. And the whole idea is to bring about the Babel syndrome. Everybody under one language, one religion, one government, so they can have this new age and this harmonic conversion, and to fight for their freedom from who they call the oppressive God of the universe, the God of the Bible.
Gotcha. Mark, was there anything you wanted to bring up before we wrap things up?
Yeah, Gary, you do have a section on the end times or second coming of Jesus. We were just talking about the New World Order. What are we supposed to be looking for and what like the New World Order comes to an end, that kind of thing. What should we be looking for in our leaders?
In terms of that they're taking us in this direction, is that what you're asking?
You have information in there about the deception of the false
right.
Antichrist will be an avatar, have the name Abaddon or
Abaddon. You're talking about Abaddon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Describe what the end time is going to be like.
Well, it's going to be a world turned upside down and inside out, and we're being prepared for that as we go forward. But you're going to have not only these birth pangs that I was talking about, but you're going to have a rise of a religion that's going to consume the whole earth, and it's going to be, I think, the Gnostic religion, and typically called Babel because that's where it goes back to, which is the Babylon of end time prophecy. But it's going to take false prophets and a major false prophet to bring this about. And they're going to have to predict things that if we don't come together, God's going to destroy the earth, and we're going to become extinct. So you're going to have to come together to do this. So it's going to have to involve the de-deifying of Jesus down to prophet status and destroying Christianity, but not completely, so that they can fold it into this new polytheist religion. And the secret societies and these Gnostic religions believe they have the evidence to prove that Jesus didn't die on the cross, but he did produce progeny. So expect that that's going to happen, and you're going to have this religion be the one that starts to bring the world together in combination with catastrophes to drive them together. And don't be surprised if there's a encounter where we find out we're not alone in the universe, because that always drives people together as well. But you're also going to have the abyss opened up, as you're referring to Abaddon or Apollyon, which a lot of people think that they're trying to do with CERN. I think they're doing more than one thing. You've got quantum computers there, and it's interdimensional, and the abyss is thought to be an interdimensional prison for these impassioned fallen angels. Abaddon, who leads these strange beings coming out of the abyss in Revelation 9, is also called Apollyon or Apollo. And this is also the same sort of god of the underworld that is equivalent to Azazel in the book of Enoch, and he was the leader of the Watchers. And the crime for violating the laws of creation in the antediluvian epoch, for having sex with human females to create demigods in the physical world, was they were punished by being locked in the abyss until the end time. So when I said there's a possibility they could come back and recreate giants in the end time, you've got these worst of the fallen angels being released, and demons coming out with them as well, which are probably the worst of them. And expect that Abaddon is going to possess or avatar the Antichrist, because we understand that Antichrist is the one who once was, now is not, but is coming again and comes up out of the abyss. So this all happens in the end time. So there's going to be a new world order that's signed with a world peace agreement that's going to secure the safety of Israel as they sign on, and that's going to be done by Antichrist in partnership with the false religion. And Antichrist from that will rise to power with his fame and oratory abilities and be crowned at the 3.5 point of the last 7 years.
Amazing stuff. And man, I just want to give Gary one last opportunity to please tell us where we can find your material, your websites, your books, that sort of thing. Gary.
You can follow me on Facebook under Gary Wayne, and I try and put out a major posting that clarifies things, whether it's the double cross of Lorraine and Knights Templars and secret societies, and at least once a week. And I also post on to my Genesis 6 conspiracy pages. I also have a group where I post my interviews and do postings on called Gary Wayne, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And if you do ask me a question, I will get back to you. You can also follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63. And you can go to my website, Genesis6conspiracy.com.
Okay, guys, one more and then I'm out.
Around, of course, the world. And day before yesterday, I did a video covering some of the curious things going on with wildlife and various animals around, of course, the world. And interestingly, I looked into it more because I saw a number of really interesting articles, and my friend was sending me various things. And I also looked around more just at what I could find. And honestly, I found some very mind-blowing things that are going currently on. You're going to be amazed. You think we're already living in a sci-fi movie? Wait till you see this stuff, folks. Wait till you see some of the stuff I got in this video. All right. First, I'm going to show you some clips. You know, if you've been looking around at some of this already, you might have seen a couple of these clips. But this is actually not this is not actually the most important thing. This is just some little stuff I'm going to just start off with. All right. Check this out. You can see here, obviously, horses in the middle of a city just going in a circle. All right. Kind of interesting. Of course, you have a lot of other even wildlife, as you can see here, doing it as well, doing the circle. And of course, the last video I showed was essentially about the sheep, and which is shown here. Okay, sheep going in a circle, and it's a perfect circle, and they did it for 12 days straight. Of course, what a lot of people don't think about is how often do you need to drink water? How often do you need to eat food? And you have these animals for 12 days straight walking in a circle. If you could even imagine that, you have to drink water every couple days. So these animals are just nonstop dedicated to walking in a circle for 12 days straight.
Yeah, it's
Can you imagine walking for 12 days straight nonstop? I mean, or just for almost nonstop. Obviously, I'm guessing they probably had to take a drink or something here and there, but the circle remained. You see what I mean? So that was what I covered in my previous video. But what was interesting is I found a lot more stuff. This is not just one little isolated, of course, thing. There's way more to this, folks. We're seeing some interesting, of course, connections as well. I'm seeing things that have to do with frequencies, audio. I'm seeing things that have to do with seismic activity, magnetic fields. Now, I'm not sure what the explanation is for all this. I'm going to just show you a number of things. And like I said, some of this, okay, a lot of people were sort of comparing this to a movie that I've talked about many times. I've actually had numerous videos, even years ago, talking about this particular movie that had Samuel L. Jackson in it called The Cell, I think, or Cell, I can't remember, what it was something like that. And essentially where it was a phone signal that was put out, and then everyone essentially became kind of like in a sci-fi movie or a zombie movie, you know what I mean? And what's interesting is in that movie, they would also walk in circles. That was part of the movie. Well, we have some really interesting stuff that relates to this. Okay, let me just show you one thing that will just, I'm not going to get into this article, but I'm just going to show you a glance of it just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, folks. Okay, just to give you an idea. If I can get these pop-ups off my screen, can you just go away? All right, check this out. Pigeon with its head completely backwards. This is like common, not common, but there's actually a number of birds this is happening to, where their head is literally backwards, and they keep it like that. And they're saying, like I said, a sci-fi movie, and they're saying it's some sort of mysterious thing happening to them. Some are saying it's like in a zombie movie or something, sort of something inside them, right? I'm like, really? Seriously? I mean, how often have you seen something like this? And they literally keep their head like this all the time. If you can imagine me with my head backwards, okay, walking around. Okay, you see what I'm getting at? This sounds like something from a sci-fi movie. And this is new. Pigeons transform into these things with their necks completely backwards. And it's not the only bird, apparently. It says that it can affect you and I. Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. That's good to know that will happen to me. So here's another one right here. And they walk in circles as well, by the way. And they can't fly. Okay, this is just one of many stories. But that one alone should just be like, what? Okay, what is going on here? This is new stuff. And I mentioned in my previous video, of course, that 70% of all the entire population of animals is gone. So imagine there was 100 million animals before. I don't know how many animals are in the world. Let's just say 100 million. I'm sure it's probably more, I don't know, whatever. 100 million animals in the world in 1970. Now we have 30 million. So it was 100 million. Now we have 30 million. It's probably in the billions, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. So you got 100 million before, you got 30 million now. That is a huge, huge, huge decrease from former population levels, right? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Of course, we have, what is different today? What is different today? They, of course, tell you it's climate change. What's climate change? Really? Really? So for thousands and thousands of years, you know, you had volcanoes. I actually took classes in this, in pollution. I took a book that was this thick and read through a lot of it. And in the end of the book, it was talking about how actually volcanoes put way more pollution out than your car does. Way, way, way more. So I'm like looking at all these scientific articles. I'm looking at like, you know, scientists saying, look, you know, actually volcanoes pollute far more than your car does. Of course, they have bigger hydrocarbons. So some say that's an effect, that's a different factor. But look, they talk about climate change. They talk about pollution. That's not what's doing these things. Okay. That's not it. We have all this new technology, and I'm going to show you some of this stuff. And you hear about these different technologies, and then you'll hear about it from a scientific journal or something, but then you'll have an outlet over here saying, no, it doesn't exist. You know, what are you, this? And you go over here to a scientific article, and they're like, yeah, it actually does, and this is what it does, and here's how it works, and here's actually the specs to it. And then you got this other outlet over here saying, no, that's not, what are you talking about? You know, who are you listening to? You know what I mean? It's like that. And I just find this amazing. I'm going to be doing 2 videos on this, actually. And look at this. Okay, here's just an example. I'm going to get into a number of stories and kind of connecting things. It sounds like a headache. Mysterious, of course, sound plagues Brooklyn neighborhood. And so you have these residents within a Brooklyn neighborhood that keep hearing a mysterious sound. Of course, we've heard a lot of stories like this in the past. And of course, you could just discount it. It could just be like, you know, whatever. So maybe there's some sort of a machinery running a mile away and they didn't realize it. Maybe there's something digging down deep. There's maybe boring a hole in the earth or whatever it might be, right? Or it could be something else. Because we've had also stories of where they're hearing sounds from the sky. They're hearing it from the sky. It's not from the ground. It's not sideways. It's literally above them. And there's nothing there. And they keep hearing it. And how do you explain that? There's clearly, if it's coming from the sky, it's not coming from the ground. It's not coming from this level you're on. That doesn't make sense, right? So that
16,000 kilometers, 16 test drivers, 1 Ford Ranger. We're pushing the range.
So that's just one simple question to ask. Then you have this story here. Again, like these are not all connected or anything, but you just start seeing a sort of an interesting you know, pattern with all this. And of course, it's loading an advertisement. Wow, great. Minnesota wolf acting strangely towards people. Okay. And actually, here we go. So, like, literally, we have them acting completely different than they used to. We're talking about wolves in Minnesota acting strangely in what experts have described not, of course, normal. And they're saying, okay, so they have here Voyager's Wolf Project, which studies wolves and their prey in the greater Voyager's ecosystem. is displaying little to no fear of people, which is unusual for these animals. Some folks have tried to scare it off of the road with little success. So they're just like hanging around humans. It's like they're like acting like domesticated dogs. Why are these wolves acting like domesticated dogs? They're just walking around in the city. They're not, you know, you can't do anything to get rid of them apparently. So that's a little different. I mean, we don't know what that is. Who knows what that is, right? It's a story. Then you have, and I'm just going to show you different stories. So then we have another story. Now this is Yellowstone wolves. This is a completely different area. I actually lived in Minnesota for like a couple months near Duluth and Cloquet. I can't even say it. I lived near an Indian reservation, actually, in a park. That's where I was staying at the time. But check this out. A mind, of course, we're talking control, and it says it's some sort of parasite. This is what they're saying. Okay, I'm not saying it. This is what they're saying. This is a main, of course, outlet here. Wolves acting foolhardy. I can't even speak today for some reason. Okay, so they're talking about a parasite in wolves. So what are they doing? Okay, so what are they saying they're doing? Ability to, okay, so they're basically acting more risky, and this is what the other ones were doing. They're going around people and things like that, and they're not even really explaining it. I'm trying to read through this and trying to figure out what they're saying. So they're saying, again, just like a zombie movie, they're talking about them acting different. And they're talking about ants doing the same thing and they're claiming it's a fungus. And they're saying the same thing's happening with a lot of geese. And they're calling it something else. They're saying it's some sort of, right? That whole thing. But then there's other articles I went over in the previous video the day before yesterday saying that it was some sort of fungus. And they were saying it was a fungus. And it was in Minnesota that was happening with the geese. So you have wolves and geese and birds acting differently in Minnesota, in Yellowstone. And Yellowstone's kind of interesting because, of course, they got the super volcano there. And I'm kind of wondering if it has to do with magnetic interference, which is another thing that I've been looking into. There's some really interesting things about that. There's some new technology that CHINA has in that realm, and we saw the story with the whole sheep in CHINA. It was in Inner Mongolia. But so that's why I'm wondering which one it is. What is it? Is it some sort of frequency thing? Is it a magnetic thing? Is it something else? They're saying some sort of fungus, or like these zombie movies or something. You know, like something's going around, right? Or maybe like the movies, of course, Cell with Samuel L. Jackson. That's yet another example. But so what is it? You know, what is it? So I'm looking around at all these different articles, and there is something happening with animals. We're seeing it. We're seeing it with a lot of different things. Wolves, we're seeing it with geese, and actually, so then I think this was the video that kind of got me on this little trail. It was from this channel, so you want to go check this channel out right here. He's got some interesting, and actually, this is the only video of his I saw, honestly. And he had a lot of really interesting stuff he's pointing out. And here he is talking about Yellowstone, and he's playing some video from Yellowstone. Again, and like I said, we have Yellowstone and we have Minnesota, right? And actually a number of other places as well. But of course, you have some more activity that's been going on with regards to the supervolcano in Yellowstone. So I don't know if there's something going on there, if there's some sort of magnetic thing or something, or I'm not sure. Maybe there's something that's from that's causing some of this. But what's interesting, there's even some sort of, again, referring to those type of movies, right? Like the zombie movies, for example. There is something that was recently found. Where was that at? I got so much stuff to show you folks. Honestly, I really could stay here for probably 30 minutes. That's why I'm going to do 2 videos. Yeah, we got the magnetic wave one I'm going to show you. Then we got this. Look, here's just 2 articles. I'm just going to show you this a little bit. New type of magnetic wave might explain the strange fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. So there, and this is updated earlier this year. So you got that one. It was in July. Then you have this other article. Look at this one. Scientists revived ancient, as you can see, you can read on the screen here. I'm not going to say the words. Frozen for eons in Siberia. Could this be something like that going around now? They revived it. So scientists, once again, scientists playing with these things. Kind of interesting, right? So could that explain some of this? I don't know. Could it be this one? Could it be this magnetic field thing? Could it be, there's also some other explanations people have had. And I'm going to be getting into a lot more here. First, I want to mention about my website. Link is in the description. I just added a bunch of videos, I think 5 videos last night. Some of the more recent videos I've created on both channels, Sail 91 and God Rules. Link is in the description for my website. Let me show you this here. Actually, you can even see, here's the video I was talking about. If I can get it to load. All right, so you can see, here's the one I did last, okay? And this is just the updated. I'm just doing I've done more research into this, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? So obviously I'm putting some of these videos over, and this is in the free video section. I'm not putting all my videos in the free video section, obviously, but some of them are over here in the free video section. I have more of them over in the membership section. $4.95 a month. First month is free. Link is in the description. Of course, I'm going to be putting forums over there soon. And I'm going to be doing a raffle soon. Not yet, but very soon. And of course, food supply, 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. $6.47 for a month's worth, or 3 months worth, not 1 month. 3 months worth for $6.47. 1 month for $2.07. Same price as 2 years ago when it was on sale. This is actually the sale price from, and I mean, it's been as high as $8.40. So $6.40 right now it's $6.40. It was $8.40 before. If you haven't taken advantage of this, you're going to want to do it right now. It's $200 off. I would say it's $150 off its normal price. I think it's usually $7.95. So you're going to definitely want to take advantage if you haven't already. Also, this book here, Lost Ways, How Your Great-Great-Grandfather Lived Without Electricity, considering all that's going on with...
What if Qantas Insurance offered more than you expect? Health, car, home, and travel cover with rewards to collect. Earn Qantas points with every policy you take out.
With energy supply and all that kind of stuff, you're going to definitely want to have that just in case. You're not going to be able to buy it after the fact because there ain't going to be an internet if there's no power, right? So you want to get the printed version. Link is in the description. It's only at $30-some, hundreds of pages illustrated. At any rate, of course, also gold and silver below. And also, of course, we have our store. And I'm going to be doing some really amazing videos soon here about some new dinosaur finds. They have discovered 2 new dinosaurs. Okay, they're like miniature size. They found them, and they just found them. I'm not joking. They literally just found 2 of them. And they at first they weren't sure what it was because it looked completely different than anything else. And then they actually realized it actually looks a lot like a certain dinosaur in the past, has the exact same facial features. It's just shorter and smaller. And they just discovered that. I'm going to be doing a video on that soon here as well. And there's actually some amazing videos that have been up on Rogan. He's been interviewing some guy that also is the one who did like the 14-hour documentary on Atlantis. It's a real guy, a real researcher that goes into great detail and great links to, look into sort of what's going on with the archaeology and all that kind of stuff. He also had some really amazing stuff about the woolly mammoth being instantly frozen while it was eating, with food not digested in its stomach. And there's some other stuff that have come out related to that recently. You want to get this shirt? It's awesome. I also have we have this all on cups and or glasses and pillows and all that kind of stuff. Link is in the description. All right, so let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's see, what can I show you here, folks? So, I mean, what happened here? All right, just give me a second here. I'm trying to, okay, there's like a I'm trying to show some more videos. Let's see, what else does this guy have? No, let's go to a different one. Let's go over here. We'll do that later. Okay, so we'll just do that later. So, okay, so here we go. Let's just go to the next article here. Because I got so much stuff. I'll show some more video clips, I think, in a minute here. But look at this. New technique makes gene, of course, editing at small scale possible in also animals. And this was something I talked about 4 or 5 years ago. could this be a result of them doing stuff like this and entering of them into the population? This accidentally happened with fish. A certain fish species was let out, and it was not a good thing that happened as a result of it, folks. So we have scientists, we have them doing things now that they couldn't do before. And I'm wondering if some of this is a result of this stuff. You know, all this new technology, things they're doing, could they be, could some of this be a result of that, right? You know, for some reason, they don't seem to respect this. They don't respect nature. You know what I mean? But then they tell you, oh, look, climate change, and you need to pay for your carbon credits. But then, of course, we're going to fund all these scientists to do stuff. But, you know, they act like they, you know, it's just so funny. They're like saying that they respect nature, but then they don't. This is what I'm trying to get at. So then you have this as well. So you have also this. Sound waves used to steer modified, of course, worms. So they've designed a method to modify various, of course, animals, and then they can also, as you would say, control. And they can use also sound waves. So this is interesting. This is a combination of two things that I showed you here. And like I said, they also, this is what I'm saying, all these technologies, you can see how they could work together to do things with these things. And that might explain some of these things, what we see with these pigeons that I just showed you earlier. It's like, what's going on with these pigeons? Right? What is this? Walking around with their head backwards. Okay. I don't think that's exactly what we would expect. Then you have this discovery in Siberia that I was telling you about. Okay. So could they have been combining and making various technologies based off all these things that I'm showing you here? They have new ways to do things with these technologies, and you're seeing these animals not exactly behaving the way you would expect. And of course, we also have something going on with the magnetic field of recent, with various fluctuations also. The question is, what is this all? You know what I mean? And I have a lot more to get into actually here. And I wanted to show you guys more clips, but we even have something going on with, I mean, there's so much of this. I'm only halfway through this. I'm going to just show you a glance at some of these articles. I'm going to cover them more so on my other channel. Here we have CHINA claims new world record for strongest, as you would say, steady, you know, magnetic field. So they're able to create them. We have these scientists over here saying there's something changing with the magnetic field. Then we have a country making a technology that made the strongest, steady, of course, magnetic field. It's like, could they be related? We don't know. Maybe it's not related. Maybe it is related. This is something, and a lot of these articles just came out with ever since July. Some of these are from November. And of course, in that particular country I just showed you there, CHINA, they have had reports of a lot of animals coming into the city that didn't do that before. And could that be a result of some of this technology also? And there's even articles about this. I'm going to be getting into all this and more over on my other video.
Okay, guys, I'm out. See you tomorrow. Thanks for joining.